Call for the special board meeting, August 15th, 2022. The motion to suspend the rules. Next month, seconded. First, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No. No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Roll call.
Reagan,
Here.
Forsythe, Lightfoot.
Here.
Here.
Others, Misha.
Here.
Here.
Peters,
Here.
Bay,
Here.
Haggard, Yacob,
Here.
Barquette,
Here.
Terminelli. Here. Curran. Here.
Approval of tonight's agenda. Second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be voting against this resolution. Not for the content of it, because I agree that Sheriff's Quest to have those additional people there and the way we hope to go about. But I base my disagreement on is the fact that we have a vacancy policy in place, work fine, as far as I'm concerned. And I think prior conversations for probably most of the board members, the county administrator has never indicated any bad feeling or need to change or amend or adapt to another process for filling vacancies. I see no emergency here. Other legislators do. I see a situation where if we replace part-timers with full-timers, that there will come a time when those people that are out on their various types of leave will be coming back to work. Now we have a situation where the taxpayer will be asked to pick up 3 or 5 or whatever the number of positions are that exceed what the state demands that we have. So for those reasons, and because it's a procedural thing, we have a committee to fill vacancies. We don't normally fill them with a resolution from the floor. If we're going to have a policy and a procedure for filling vacancies, then we darn well ought to be followed. If we have policies and like for other things, real property, there are others that I'm not thinking about right now. We follow those procedures, we follow those policies. If the vacancy committee is our policy, then that's the way vacancies should be considered, and if warranted, filled. I know that. And for that reason, I'll be voting against the resolution for that reason, not because I don't agree that something needs to be done. And
I don't disagree with what was said. I respect the process. Issues that I have about this resolution.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, there has not been a resolution introduced. Are we not at approval of tonight's agenda? That's what we're discussing. We have not voted for the approval of the agenda, is that correct? So is there a motion been made? So I would move to approve tonight's agenda. Special board meeting.
So, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay,
We will not have this.
Resolution.
now we're going to vote on the resolution.
Well,
We're gonna- somebody's gonna
introduce
make a
it.
motion. I'll move the resolution.
Ready to move the resolution, second by Ms. Kern. Any discussion? Go ahead, now.
Last week to presented about the entire situation. We're short-handed. Functions. We said about respect. That's different to you. Question I have is this really that's the situation? Sheriff is here, does the sheriff have part-time officers that are ready, willing, and able to step into this full-time position without going through training process that is down the road? And what will happen once these people that are sick or on leave are able to come back with these new positions?
That discussion, that question, absolutely sure.
You do.
He's on the list.
Sure. Look into that. Yeah, we got you, I'm sure.
Your audio is very hard to hear, so I didn't hear much of anything from anybody yet.
Would you like to speak up and ask your question in a real loud, direct sort of way so the sheriff may feel it?
If you want, I can come right over. I'm right across the street because your audio, I cannot hear what you're saying.
Yeah, come on.
That's fine, Sheriff. We can hold up. Like, up to that point, we'll have.
So with regard to the part-time positions, there has been a very difficult time filling part-time positions and maintaining staff for a variety of reasons. Our part-time positions have a cap on the number of hours. Some of you may recall years ago, preventing the availability of benefits. So in that way, health insurance, some folks aren't interested in part-time positions. They don't offer benefits. So I think that there have been short tenure. Some folks have opted not to take those positions. And that's part of what prompted the reduction in from 10 down to 5, down to 5 positions. But also there are a couple of people holding part-time positions that aren't available to work. So that really has limited what normally would be 10 full positions of part-timers available to work that now is reduced in large part to 4. And so with many of the absences and schedules that needed to be filled, that's required not only the part-timers, but a lot of the folks that are full-time to be forced over and to work far more frequently than we would like.
Sure. Are there other questions? So, Sheriff, please.
I just audio. Want me to
Just go ahead.
questions? We have people that are ready, willing, and able to step into these full-time positions. The question would be relative to the immediacy of the or are they going to have to go through a training process, which would be just down the road? Because if you do have people that would be ready to start work right away, and it's understandable that tonight. As an exception to the general procedure of going through the vacancy. And also then, if these people do get hired as full-time positions, what would happen to the people that are on leave now or vacation, sick, medical leave, once they come back to work and you have more than the number that's hired?
Right, so 5 questions there. Right, start out. Civil service, obviously the hiring process is through civil service. You do it that way, or you take a transfer. Let's say what's going to occur, can't get the crystal ball out, although most of the time you go through civil service. You get a list, you interview the people that are on the list, you figure out the list. Once in a while, you might get the transfer. Immediacy is urgent, as I said last week, that moving forward these positions. We have right now 5 part-time openings that aren't even filled. So by cutting the 5 part-time, you're not cutting anybody. Just fill those 5 part-time. Why you make it full-time, because the appetite for a full-time job right now is much more than part-time. Work it out, but we want to see if we can at least get some opportunity to hire people that are in full-time, part-time. That being said, the civil services, going back to that, is very right at the bottom of civil services. My understanding is Dr. Charter, there's only 3 candidates on the list. Once that list is exhausted, then I have the option of hiring off the street, literally advertising, taking people, vetting them still off the street to come work for me until they can originally take the test, which is probably for December, maybe early next year. So there's a lot of moving parts here as far as I'm trying to fill these positions, service-wise, transfer-wise. This is getting thin, part-time against full-time. You know, we've had many discussions with administration. What's the best approach? Best approach is to cut these 5 part-timers. Again, we're at a precarious position that all these people that are out. Once they return, even if they all return, I don't see the solve issue fully, because the way the contracts are written for the COs and the supervisor COs, that they have a certain amount of time to get off, little holiday, personal time, vacation time. Those contracts dictate that I can't only deny certain people certain requests. That comes in the report. So my opinion is, I think we need a model where we have 59 to 61 COs. I think it's going to cut down immensely on overtime. It's going to cut down on force people. It's going to cut down on doubles of the work. I know assistance for people that are out on sick leave or comp time or little holiday time. Of course, it's just a model that it's not working the way it is now. I'm trying to come up with a solution, not only to save the taxpayers money, to alleviate stress from COs that they're pouring by getting forced over instantly, working doubles. It's just not a safe atmosphere. It's not safe for them. It's not safe for them. Well, it isn't. I don't do something, and I have my job in diligence, sending what I think should happen in that facility. That's why I came.
Like a couple of questions. You don't have a little, you don't have a list right now. You've got 3 people on a civil service list. Obviously, you don't want to take those people.
No, I didn't say that. There's only 3 eligible on the list.
Okay.
Because of the civil service
Have
rule.
they been approached, with the thought that, maybe smoking?
So the civil service works this way. You first have to send a letter requiring each individual that qualifies. Send a letter out. They have 10 days to respond. Yea or nay. I want the job. I don't want the job. I want to stay on the list. I want this job at this time and this time. Let's keep me on the list. It's next time. That's the first part. And then it's 10 days. Now, we used to, after the 10 days, get everybody that would say, yeah, I'm interested in the job. And then we send them a packet to vet them, right? We'll fill out all their particulars, pedigree, education, training, all that stuff. Vet people on, whether it's civil department, road patrol, or jail, we vet people. Sure, we get the right person for that job. That usually takes 10 days. What we've done is, because the process is taking so long, we now combine the interest letter with the packet. So we can send both up at the same time, saves us a little time in the back end, not an additional 10 days. Because civil service rule says we have 10 days and send a letter out to respond. Wait the 10 days, it's rule. And that form was packed for 10 days. Well, we found out we could combine by sending out interest. Well, if you're interested, build the packet, then get us in. So are we going to inquire with those people? Yes. Are we going to send out the letters? Ready to response to that? Do we send out Friday or today?
Okay, so you have 5 part-time positions now. Are they all working?
I have 10 total part-timers.
So I know that, but of the 5 that you have left that are available,
Yes, they're
they are working.
currently working.
Are any of those 5 interested in becoming full-time CO?
Great question. So out of the 5, 2 are ex COs that were full-time, retired, came back for part-time, which helps us out.
Yeah.
Train, give us hours, that's great. The other three, no, 2 out of the 3, actually 1 is interested, the other 2 said, no, we still just want to stay part-time. Other 2
Okay. So, the best of circumstances, with regard to part-timers, if they were interested, they could be hired, am I correct in assuming that they could be hired as full-time deputies tomorrow?
Yes, that's what we usually do. They all, our position right now presently is you start part-time.
Yes.
And then after you can be promoted to full.
Okay, so that's not gonna happen though. Those 2 are retirees and 3 are not interested.
2 of them.
Okay. So conceivably 2 could be interested in that, one?
One out of the 3 that are eligible is a part.
So you're looking at filling how many positions full-time do you want to see filled as a result of this resolution?
I want to take the 5 part-timers, give them 3 full.
Okay, so you don't have them on a list right now, and you don't have them on part-time status where they could be hired, and there would be some immediacy to getting them on the job and work, right?
Correct.
So the civil service test, the next test to be given, you know when it will be?
I think last time we talked to Johnny was next year, but then I think she called down and was going to try to get something for us.
So unless you have transfers, likelihood is that even if this passed tonight, and you have the authorization to fill 3 positions, that you'd be hard pressed to do it because there's really nobody available. The civil service list, 1 person available, which I'm sure would help, but you're not going to come close to what your goal is, right?
Try my darndest. I mean,
I understand that, but I mean, it's just not the cards.
it could be. I have to, after the civil service list is exhausted, and I'm going to have to advertise it to the public.
But they have to set up the civil service list, student test. And that's why I'm asking, when would
Yeah,
that?
so I
would be?
would hire them.
So we're looking at something out in the future, and we don't know how long that will be. Let me get back to what my point is. My problem with this is that we have a procedure for filling vacancies. End of story. We're not following it by taking a resolution from the floor and voting on it and bringing it to the full board as we are here tonight. I like the procedure, to be honest. I think that if we've got a procedure or a policy, if we aren't going to follow it, we need to get rid of it. And I think that by and large, that vacancy committee and the way it's been run, and I think you'll agree because I remember very few instances where we haven't listened to you and at least taken your side with some of the requests that you've made. I think this board has been very accountable. And I agree that we need to do something, no question about it. It's the way it's being done that I don't want. And what I'm saying is, if we approve this tonight, you will have the authority to hire 3 people. When? We have no idea. It could be a month down the road, could be 10 days down the road. You could get 3 transfers in from some other facility that might want to work there. That's unlikely. So how long would you anticipate if you had to wait and this resolution were pending before this board tonight? How long would you have to wait in order to get qualified candidates for you to get the applications to give them the time to complete them and return them, to do the background investigation that you would have to do, that's the civil service test that we don't know whether it's scheduled or not. How long do you figure that will take?
All I can say to that is it's going to push the procedure down the line. I won't be able to start the procedure unless this is passed. And so it's not passed now, which is up to you guys. What you're doing as far as vacancy, you're not. What it does is it passes today, it gives me the opportunity to, let's say it takes 2 months to get this passed. If you go the regular procedure, that gives me 2 months that I can't do anything as far as hiring people. This affords me the opportunity to start today, to get the hiring process done, because the process is the process. If you don't delay it today, you don't approve it till a month or two down, I've lost 2 months of time to try to recruit people.
So what would you do tomorrow, this passes tonight?
I start.
What would you do? What would be the first thing you do to get 3 people to come work for you?
The process has already started, but once we get through that list, there's no more eligible. I can then advertise to the public.
But you told me that those 3 people on that list don't meet your standards or whatever. You would not want.
I guess you don't understand what I'm saying. The process, all you're asking me is the process starts tonight or it starts a month or 2 months down the road. The same process is going to be the process. The process is
What
going
I'm
to
asking you for is what starts the process?
the civil service starts the process, which is already done.
But I'll leave it here because I don't want to have a friction between the sheriff's department and this board or the sheriff's department and us. I'm looking at this, yes, you need to, I agree. Okay, my concern is, what do you do when these people come back to work that have already been off, and now we've exceeded what the minimum standard? We've got 3 or 4 or whatever more people than is actually mandated, number 1. Number 2, the policy and the way this is being done. I don't agree with it. As a legislator, I have the right to question it and to make my feelings known, and that's what I'm doing. It has nothing to do with your need for manpower, which I agree is something that you need, at least on a temporary basis. I agree with that. Okay, so I have no further questions.
Other questions? Mr. Kevin Akers has been on for a while. Great. Great. That's.
So I understand, I respect Mr. Lightfoot's problems with the procedure. What I will say is a historical example. If General Patton had followed procedure, he would have hooked up with the English and he would not have surged towards the Battle of the Bulge. We would have lost. Germans would have regained foothold, and how many lives would have been lost? Initiative on his part. The sheriff presented an example to all of us that there was an emergency. The thing that got my attention was the 2 people, the individuals that were doing 18-hour shifts back to back. Today's environment doesn't take somebody who's working 18 hours one day, 18 hours the next day, 6 hours of sleep, no family time, or the wife or himself or whatever, say, you know what, I'm going to go work for somebody else for $25, $26 an hour. And I don't have to break up any fights. I don't have to look for drugs. I can just do my thing. I got a weekend off. So to me, this emergency, you articulated well. And this is, I understand. I hated when I was in the minority, when the resolutions would come from the floor, we had a chance to see them, or they were circulated that night. I understand that. But I felt that you presented a case that I thought that we were going to lose people. Today's environment, it's so easy for people to find employment someplace else that is better suited to their family or their financial needs. I wholeheartedly support this resolution. It's my resolution. I stand by it, and I hope everybody else supports it.
Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important for us to not try to second guess the sheriff on how to run his department and how to fill his personnel needs. We've all seen that the sheriff is dealing with a lot of overtime. He has a lot of mandates he has to deal with, and he has come to us, told us that he has a problem, has told us that this can help him address the problem. It may not address the problem immediately. It may take some weeks, may take a couple months, but he should support the sheriff, support the department, let him address this as best he can, as quickly as he can. And I have complete confidence in the sheriff, and we urge everyone to support his request. Thank you.
Mr. Denise.
Sure. One quick question. Is it true that you can do a provisional, say the civil service test is not going to be till, if you're not successful in getting one, and it'll be till 2 years. You can provisionally have someone, and they will have to take the test in order to be permanent.
That's correct.
It's true.
Go ahead, Dave.
You can appoint a provisional. So, you can appoint a provisional, don't they have to go through the training plan?
Yeah, anybody you hire, you're not gonna stick in there. There's gonna be FTO, your field training officer, there'll be 4 to 6 weeks in training and how to do the job. Someone off the street's just not gonna walk in and start doing the job. That's the process with anybody.
Sure, so I got it. And when will that take place? When's that training class? The next one?
So when they start working, they go with an FTO shift. So whoever gets hired, they'll be assigned an FTO, field training officer.
So right now,
First day they walk in on the job,
okay,
they're gonna go and work with the officer, learn weights and everything. All the training. That stuff starts big.
okay, perfect. When is the next vacancy review?
Be September 13th.
See, I don't see a need for a vacancy review. You made the case. I agree with Joe on the aspect of going outside it. We've already made the case, and I think it's a great case. And it always has been an issue with, we always kept trying to increase the salary and trying to do this and get more and whatever. And that list 12 years ago, 11 years ago, there was a couple hundred, I think, that took it, and he went down to it, and then part-timers, most of them were to hopefully become full-time. But now, and I know some of the full-timers that are part, so, which is good. I'll support it. It's just, I agree with you on the process, the process, but I understand we got an issue. One question, and I brought it up a few times over the last couple of years, the minimum staffing. People starting to talk about it, and they say, corrections said, give it a year to make sure, because the amount of people in jail is not that good. So I've never heard another conversation. Have they ever looked at that? Or is this why? Are you trying to keep minimum 56 even though there's less inmates, whatever we have to call now?
I don't know if we say less inmates. Back when you had that discussion when I first became sheriff, and you were bail reform, we literally were down about 40 inmates. First transpired and then COVID hit us. The jail atmosphere as well as the world, we know that. We're up to about 100 inmates. Not down to that 40. Let's look at the issue of 56 minimum staffing. I would guard and say this, watch the commission work, because the commission could come in and say, oh, you're about 120, you say 120, you need 65 COs. So I don't know what their premise would be on that, but I can guarantee that 120 inmates, there's not going to go down to 56. That's not ever happening. By me talking to my administration. So where this is going to go, who knows? We're going to do some studies and look at this. COVID hit, everything went upside down along with that premise about we're going to review staff minimums. They've been so busy with everything else, halt, mapping, it's kind of been put on the back burner. Commission, commission is coming in to our facility next week, and once a year for about a week. go through all your policy procedures. And give you a grade, what you're doing in there, we always have building, right, A plus type grades come from our facility. Actually, one of the facilities where other counties that are building jails will come up and visit our facility. This commission says, St. Lawrence County is doing it the right way, go visit their facility, look what they've got in place. That's pretty good kudos for our administration and our jail. Proud of that. As far as the minimum, right now, that's.
Well, like I said, I'm going to support it. I do agree with Joe on the procedural aspect, but really, as far as I'm concerned with that, and everyone's had a chance to do it, so. I'll vote.
Mr. Fay.
When the presentation was made by the sheriff, one of the things that I really was interested in was burnout, and burnout can happen off the class. It was for his position, one of his resident correction officers, I was asked to give a recommendation for another job. I will be supported.
Mr. Burke.
Annie's point about burnout is a good one. Sheriff presented to us that it was health and safety of his officers. Then could be a court to use one more for burnout and state overtime stress from the job. I'm not into debating whether we should follow protocol or not, but I think the sheriff hardly ever comes with us with a special. I think we respond to it. It's not fair.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Chair's appointments, for the open space conservation plan advisory committee. Walt Paul, Rita Kern. No further business, need a motion. Motion, second. All in favor?
Aye. I'd like to call to order the Sheriff County Services Committee meeting for Monday, August 15, 2022. And I would ask for approval of the agenda. Mr. Denisha, seconded by Ms. Curran. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Ask for a resolution approving the minutes of the July 18, 2022 Services Committee meeting by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Forsythe. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. At this time, doing things just a shade differently tonight. We're going to have executive session to start the meeting off for
litigation, personnel, negotiations. And we'll see. And to the personnel for executive is for the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation.
Thank you. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Mr. Smithers, second by Mr. Sheridan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Give Mr. Burke another minute. We will hear from the Department of Social Services. Senator Heather Rand. And Chris Jenner? Chandler. Your name anytime, I apologize.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So we are going to present you with a lot of data tonight. We're starting with the social services monthly update for June 2022. So for June, DPS saw 182 new referrals that included 385 additional children being monitored through Child Protective Services. This was an increase of 3 referrals from the month of May and 15 less youth. When we look at how cases were closed for the month of June, 12% of those cases were indicated. 26% of those cases were assessed through the family assessment response, and 62% were unfounded. Looking at the yearly average to date through June, we had 16% indicated, 18% FAR, and 66% unfounded. The actual trend is moving in the direction away from the 15–16% indicated as we anticipated due to this change in the New York State Central Registry reform at the beginning of this year. Safety checks completed on time. Again, this is New York State data, so the 98% is actually for the month of May 2022. 98% of the 7-day safety assessments were completed, documented, and approved timely. The agency continues to strive for 100%, despite being higher than the state average consistent. As a result of hiring, training, and moving caseworkers into Child Protective Services, we've seen the average caseload go down again from 24 in the month of May to 23 for the month of June, as we continue to move towards that desired caseload of a max of 15. For June, the total number of open cases in Child Protective Services was 634, compared to 683 in the month of May. This is a net change of 49 cases. 173 cases were closed in the month of June. Looking at the individual units in Child Protective Services, I'll just make some small points. Again, the supervisors are listed. Those are the number of the units, and then you'll see the number in the bottom as well. They typically do not carry caseloads. So in looking at unit 5478, I'll just note that worker 6982 was down 13 cases the previous month as well. And moving through some of the units, we'll get into a little bit more depth in the July report as well as the year in review. Unit 7255 saw a total net change of, they're down 15 for the month of June, and unit 2942 is down 21 cases for the month of June. We have a full training pod of 5 CCS caseworkers in the training period for June. And if you look at the visual of the 173 cases that were closed along the bottom, you will see case closures from 1 all the way to 18 cases closed by individual workers. The foster care statistics for the month of June, number of youth that are in the custody of St. Martin County Commissioner for the month of June was 285. We had 140 youth placed in kinship foster homes and 19 home on trial basis with family. So 126 youth were placed in non-kinship homes for the month of June. The overall change for youth in care was down 1 from last month to 86 for the month of May. The average number of children in care continues to decline. In May, it was 300, June, 298. However, the average days children have been in care continues to increase slightly, 771 in May to 776 in June. This will be discussed a little bit deeper in the year in review statistics as well. The average preventive caseload for workers, these are workers that are working with children and family, with youth that are at risk of placement in foster care and adoption, is 11. That was the same for the month of May. Unit 6053 was down 6 cases for the month of June. Unit 660 stayed pretty steady. The adolescent unit, which is unit 6336, was down 5 cases overall for the month. And unit 5748 has a lot of the newer workers who are just beginning to get some cases and work with families on their own. So the caseloads are lower in that unit as they begin to take on that new role. The adoption unit, unit 3660, there were 2 adoptions that took place in the month of June, and the net change overall with new cases coming into the unit and cases leaving the unit or closing with 0. If we look at the home finding unit, this is the number of certified foster homes that we have for St. Lawrence County. In June, there was a change of, we lost 3 regular foster homes, but we increased by 12 kinship homes. So overall, and that change is an increase of 9 certified foster homes to the department. The average number of children receiving services and preventive services, which are specifically children who are at risk of placement in foster care, is 142 youth. That's down from 161 in May. And the reasons for that are going to be explored a little bit more in the year in review as well. We have 2 workers in the training period. One will complete training July 30th, which you'll see in the July data. The visual representation of the 23 cases that were closed in June is along the bottom of page 6, including foster care, preventive, adoption, and adoption programs. So that includes all 3 program areas. For adoption activity, we had, as I mentioned, 2 youth adopted for the month of June. We have 17 that are free without an adoptive resource, and that is down from 20 in May. And we have 57 youth free for adoption. Looking at the family first requirements in foster care placements, again, New York State requires St. Lawrence County to be above 50%. In our kinship homes, we are at 56%. And the state requirement is below 12% for our institution or residential placement, and we are at 6%. St. Lawrence County also has a local goal of being below 8% in that category. Our averages year to date are 5% in institutional care, which is again below the 12% standard, and 57% in kinship care, which is also above the required 50% for federal and state requirements. We look at our eligibility programs.
Other Akers have a question.
Thank you. Heather, I was just wondering, in the free for adoption, in May, there was 56. Is the 57 number in June additional, or is just addition 1 person?
Additional 1.
Okay, thank you.
So the eligibility programs, in the actual cases for TANF, we are seeing a slight increase, but really less than 2% in all TANF, or excuse me, all temporary assistance cases. So there really isn't a whole lot of change in the TA cases for families or individuals or TANF and safety net for the month of June. The SNAP cases for families has gone up, as well as medical assistance and HEAP cases. Individuals, we saw a decrease in SNAP cases, an increase in medical services, and an increase in HEAP. We'll get into a little bit more as to the reasons why HEAP has increased and why we anticipate that those numbers will continue to increase over the next 12 months as well. So that completes the June 2022 data. And moving into July's data. For child protective services, the agency saw 169 child protective referrals with an additional 352 children being monitored. As you recall, in June, we had 182 referrals with 385 children, so down slightly from the month of June. In regards to how the cases were closed out for the month of June, we have an 11% indication rate, which is moving more towards the percentage that we would anticipate with the changes in the state central registry reform that we talked about, away from that federal and state average that existed, 15 to 16%. We closed 19% of our cases using family assessment response, and 70% were unfounded. Again, looking at the average year to date, the biggest change is going to be in the indication area, and that will offset in the unfounded area and FAR. But we do anticipate that trend being more around the 11 to 12%. In safety assessments completed on time, St. Lawrence County had one safety assessment that was not approved on time and received 99% for the month of June. So the data is from the state, so it is 1 month behind. St. Lawrence County continues to perform well and is repeatedly been above that median New York State average for over a year. The average CPS caseload is an area that we've been very mindful of as we fill positions. New workers have completed training and have been able to start taking new reports. Last month, the average caseload was 23, again, as anticipated, with bringing new staff and fully trained staff into the rotation. The average caseload fell again to 22 cases reports per worker. So the total caseload or open cases for Child Protective Services is 605 cases and 634 in June, and 139 were closed. And looking at the individual units, we have a new worker that started in unit 3856, just began taking reports, as you may note. The individuals with the larger caseloads we're working on individual plans with them to close cases. So you'll see the two in this particular unit were able to close 11 cases or had a net change in their caseloads of 11 because they are still receiving new cases at the same time that they're closing cases. So an overall net change between those two workers of down 11. In unit 5478, remaining pretty steady there. Unit or the worker 8162, I just want to note, is a senior trainer. So that individual actually does not carry a caseload. However, they do assign themselves onto a case along with the worker in order to help train them on how to complete the process in a connection system. And unit 6035, we have a couple of workers that were able to combine for a net down of 10 cases. And wanted to note in unit 2942 also, one worker was down 5, unit or number 8383. Last month was down 5, down 11, so 16. 7616 was down 15 last month, although up 3 this month. As I said, they're continuing to get new cases as they're closing out other cases. And 6567 was down 5 last month, down 5 this month. So looking at our training period, we have 3 CPS caseworkers that will be done September 16th for their training, one that will be done September 30th, and one that recently completed their training. Positions update. We were able to move 1 trained foster care preventive caseworker who was also dually trained in Child Protective Services, as all caseworkers are. We recently transitioned that worker into Child Protective Services, and we have 1 vacancy in Child Protective Services. The total number of cases closed for July was 139. Supervisors and caseworkers have been working diligently, have developed individual case plans that will be discussed a little later to help with the prioritizing the process and closing cases. As we look at our foster care data for the month of July, The number of children in the custody of St. Lawrence County is now 269, from 285 previous month. We have 125 children placed with non-relatives. So if we look at the number of youth that are placed in kinship care, which is 129, and then the number of youth who are home on trial basis, the result is 125 children that are placed with non-relatives. Net change for the month of July, 16 youth. We had 23 exit care and 7 enter care. Our average number of children in care continues to decline from 298 in June to 294. However, we continue to struggle with average days children have been in care, 776 in June, 778 in July. Overall, the number of average days in care continues to increase slightly overall, although we are down from 717 days for children without an adoptive resource to 715. The average caseload for workers handling foster care, preventive, and adoption cases declined from 11 to 10 for the month of July. These cases include the number of children, as I mentioned, that are in foster care, free for adoption, and receiving preventive services through the agency. So we don't see much of a change from unit to unit. The first unit 6053 will be taking on the role of the visitation program, and visitation program including supervision of the staff and scheduling for all of the visitation that St. Lawrence County Department of Social Services staff have to provide. Unit 660, not a whole lot of movement. They did have several children transition to adoption, free for adoption. Unit 6336 is our, once again, our adolescent unit. We specialize in independent living skills, helping adolescents prepare for adulthood and the unique issues that surround adolescents and their families. Unit 5748 is really comprised of most of our new workers, as I mentioned in June's data. So they are just starting to get cases and get their feet wet in the field, working with families. Unit 3660 is our adoption unit. And last month there was a net change of 0. This month there's a net change of, we are down 4 as a result of adoptions. And you may note that we had 11 adoptions for the month of July. But when you see that net change for the adoption unit of -4, it's because they've also received cases of children who are now free for adoption. The home finding unit, net change of 0. So we did lose a home, but we added a home as well. So an update on the DSS or agency staff that are open and certified as DSS foster parents. Currently, we have 1 DSS staff that is certified and was caring for a relative from another county. However, that home is pending closure and that youth has permanency now. So we will have 0 DSS staff, 0 children. There are 0 children in St. Lawrence County custody placed in any DSS staff homes currently. The average number of children in home receiving preventive services, so those can be either voluntary or court-ordered services, down again from 142 in June to 139, and that can be for many different reasons that we'll go into a little bit more in the year in review. The training period, we have 2 individuals in the training pool. 1 will complete in the fall of 2022, and the other individual will complete around the beginning, mid of September. The 33 cases that were closed across foster care, prevention, and adoption are listed out along the bottom. And on the next page, as I mentioned, you'll see that 11 were closed through adoption. So in July, the agency had 11 youth who were adopted compared to the 2 for the month of June. There are 52 youth that are free for adoption and 19 currently without an adoptive resource. And the youth that are without an adoptive resource could be hard to place residential or institutional youth, or could be youth that are 14 or older that choose not to be adopted. In reviewing our family first data, St. Lawrence County continues to perform very well. As I mentioned, the requirement is above 50% for kinship care. We are at 55%, and below 12% for institutional care, and we dropped from 6% to 5% in institutional or residential care. Our yearly average above the 50% at 57% for kinship care, and below the 12% at 6% for a yearly average to date. So we're going to dive a little deeper into some of the trends we're seeing in the annual services data year-end review report here quickly. Overall, TA and medical services cases have declined slightly, with SNAP and KEEP cases on the rise. So one of the pieces of information that I wanted to provide for HEAP, Home Energy Assistance Program for the year 21-22 as compared to 2021. So this year we've seen an additional 514 regular applications, and with emergency first, second, and third round combined, we've seen an additional 3,317 applications, and the cooling benefits application has increased over 300%. And this is due to the fact that the requirement to have a medical condition that's exacerbated by the heat was dropped for the 21-22 season. So we've seen a large increase in the number of HEAP applications, and we anticipate that over the next 12 months as well. So that ends July.
We have a question. I have a question. Which of the centers, ESS cases that are closed within 60 days? If you have, if you don't.
I do not have it, but I.
Then if you just. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Kerr.
Can we add that monthly to?
I actually believe that Mr. Stevens add up. Big over.
Mr. Burke.
Along with that, the metrics outlined on the bottom view, 60 days is one of them, go and policy and procedures, and protocol. Some of their suggestions. It would be good to know how we're measuring up the standards they set forth. We could, and maybe just a general question, and the information is fairly new. We would expect it to be drafted, but as you're looking at it, we could have metrics they've established, reported on, and that 60 days is commission. We could have that, knowing how we're doing. Oh, one. Sure. Children's home in Jefferson County. It's hard to know whether the reduction in the number of children in foster care is due to our effort or their effort, or it would be good, since they're a contract agency, it would be good seeing how they measure up.
Okay, Mr. Snyder.
As long as we're talking about Bonneville report, one of their concerns was utilizing Jefferson County
in foster care places and difference in the cost that's involved. So I'd be interested to know why it costs so much there, and if we did anything to try to utilize Orange County more instead of utilizing their
I
services.
think that I can't speak for Mr. Seaver about what topics he's going to go over tonight, but I think that let's listen, instead of getting too specific, and, you know, let's see what he's come up with. And then we can add on or make a case for some additional information. That's okay. Someone else? Go ahead.
So we're going to move into the yearly update or year review. Looking at the year in review data, we hope to bring some additional context to looking at trend lines and the overall changes that you've seen over the last 12 months. So for Child Protective Services referrals, we see an increase both in the number of cases, or at least an increasing trend line in both the cases and the children that we are serving. Certainly much more of an increase in the number of children that are being served. And looking back to 2019 now, I will say that we are on track compared to other years for how many referrals we're going to receive. In 2019, at this point in the year, we received 1,159 referrals. 2020, 981, I believe that was COVID related. 2021, 1,211, and so far this year, 1,172. So we are well within our normal average cases that we've received so far this year. St. Lawrence County has made a very concerted effort to prioritize 7-day safety completion and documentation sensitivities of the 2020 program quality review, which began in 2021. With 70% safety assessment completion rate at that time. So as you can see, we trended from 90% where we were back in July of 2021, and most recently 98%, continuing to stay above that New York State range, moving in line of 86%.
Yes. So to that point, a lot of emphasis was placed on this early on, the changes that the board made in addition to the staffing changes. I'll just remark that January 2021, as it compares across the state, St. Lawrence County was 46th in line. By August of 2021, we were 11th. And as of June of this year, we are 6th in the state for community safety assessment. So a remarkable job done by the staff to make sure that eyes are on, as required by OCFS, within the time frame. And as Heather said a couple of different times on the report, striving for 100%, but often there are reasons outside of the department's control why they can't place eyes on these children. And very rarely, as you're seeing month after month, the staff is finding those children, making the necessary reports, and also documenting those reports. And that's critical to the success. But this is a shining star, I think, to demonstrate how well they've done. And they focus on something, there's nothing they can't accomplish.
What I'd like to highlight in the average CPS caseload is that since January 2022, with the exception of March, St. Lawrence County has been at or below that yearly average of 25. And certainly we are most recently trending in the right direction with, again, the staff that have been added and trained and now able to take CPS investigations and most recently a full training pool. Looking at the total open CPS cases, overall, pretty stable trend line for the number of open cases and referrals. However, we are moving in a slightly positive direction with the additional staff that have been added and able to handle the volume that's coming in. So we're seeing a couple of different trends, which is the decrease in the overall number of cases open, as well as the slight increase in the number of cases being able to be closed. And that has trended in the right direction in both of those areas over the past 12 months. we look at the indicated, uncounted, and FAR. Again, this is really coming out of that New York State Central Registry reform that happened in January. So we anticipate a continuing trend of moving down away from that 15–16% that we had in July of 2021 to more of the 11% that we see in July of 22. And overall, there really isn't much difference from July 2021 for the actual year-to-date average and the July 2022 averages as well, very, very close. Cost.
We'll give you a break. So now we'll begin to discuss the statistics pertaining to our foster care, preventive, and adoption units from July 2021 to July 2022. As can be seen in the first chart, we've had an overall decrease in the number of children in foster care from 317 down to 269. This can be attributed to a variety of factors, including a change in the family court judge, additional staff to monitor and assist families with achieving permanency, and an increased emphasis on linking families to appropriate services that can be utilized without youth needing to remain in foster care. The second chart pertains to the net change to children in care. As is shown here, there's been a net change of 4.5 children removed from care per month. Except for 2 months, the agency has successfully removed more children from foster care than those who have entered care in the same month. While it's difficult to explain exact reasons for the 2 outlier months, a few factors that can be contributed to more children being removed from care than were added could be the implementation of the Family First Prevention Services Act. More specifically, we've implemented blank removal meetings and kinship firewall meetings during that time frame to assist the department with determining what level of intervention is required and to ensure that all kinship resources have been identified and explored. A change in the family court judge and additional staffing hired and trained to assist families with achieving permanency for reunification with community supports in place, adoption, and kinship guardianship likely impacted these numbers as well. Although the next graph shows a decrease of approximately 100 youth receiving services in their home, this is not entirely surprising. As previously mentioned, there's been a change in the family court judge during this time frame, which has resulted in more children being placed with fit and suitable relatives when they are unable to safely remain in their home. Additionally, there's been an increased emphasis on families being connected with community level supports to address areas of concern without the department's involvement being necessary. One way this is accomplished is by a service provider making referrals to the county's single point of access committee, which is comprised of representatives from various community partners to determine if community supports can be implemented to prevent families from further disruption. The department has also been working collaboratively with the Red Lake Forward Foundation to improve access to evidence-based community services to address common areas of concern within St. Lawrence County. The next chart again shows a decrease in the average number of children in foster care, as was previously mentioned. Again, there's been a change in the family court judge within the time covered, which has shown a willingness to place children with fit and willing relatives, rather than requiring relatives to become certified foster parents, as is often required in the past. There's also been a change in the amount of time children are required to be placed on a trial basis with their parents before being removed from foster care than was previously seen. The next chart shows the average days in care for a child in foster care. Although this number is higher than the department would like to see, it should be noted that children are required to be placed outside of their parents' home for 15 of the most recent 22 months in many situations before the department is able to file a petition seeking to freedom for adoption and achieve permanency. Additionally, many of the reasons leading to children's placement in foster care are not able to be addressed within a short amount of time, such as ongoing illicit substance use, severe mental health concerns, etc. Although the county has seen some new programs open within the last year to improve access to these much needed services, such as the Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center in Ogdensburg for citizen advocates and the methadone clinics in the county, there is still a great need for additional services to address this area, particularly timely mental health services. The average caseload of a caseworker working in foster care, adoption, or preventive services has been consistent for the last year, with the yearly average caseload being 11.
The department's ability to maintain this caseload has allowed staff to meet families more frequently than the state mandates require, and to recognize and implement appropriate community services in a timely manner. As can be seen in the next chart, there's been a 72% increase in the children adopted over the last year, and a 27% increase in the number of children freed for adoption. Within the last year, the department has improved upon the ability to complete the necessary steps to achieve permanency through adoptions by allowing 2 caseworkers to specialize in the adoption process, which has decreased the amount of time required to complete the various pieces associated with the youth being adopted. It should also be noted that the supervisor over this unit became the adoption supervisor within the last year. She's been with the department for over 20 years and has trained staff in the process to complete adoptions timely. Family Court has also worked with the department to process many adoptions in a short amount of time through special events, such as a special adoption day earlier this year. The next 2 charts demonstrate the department's ability to consistently meet the requirements of the Family First Prevention Services Act. More specifically, local DSSs are required to have less than 12% of all foster care children placed in the institutional setting. The department has remained well below that due to a local goal of remaining below 8% of children placed at this level of care. Additionally, it should be noted that at least 50% of all children in foster care are required to be placed with kinship resources. The department has consistently remained above this as well. The next 2 graphs pertain to the department's home finding unit over the last 6 months. It should be noted that the department has moved a 3rd staff member to this unit to assist with the ability of these caseworkers to recruit and train new foster parents and to provide ongoing training, support, and guidance to current foster parents.
The average number of children in care, you said 51 providers. Makes it
It's a combination. There are specific criteria that they would have to meet to be considered fit for that, such as we would ask them for their consent to child abuse or their criminal history or a formal home study process that's completed. And who that home study is completed by ranges from department staff to outside contract agencies such as the United.
So that would benefit the kinship and improvement.
Correct.
In the same way. Okay.
And looking at the eligibility.
Mr. Redmond?
The Heather, changed the way the department receives legal services a while back. What has been the overall impact of that?
So on page 4, in the year, looking at the year of the adoption activity, I think that the 72% increase in the number of youth that have been adopted, as well as the 27% increase in the number of youth that have been freed for adoption, is directly tied to the changes in the legal office as well. The caseworkers have to complete the adoption packets. The petition for adoption is reviewed and approved, and of course, the process goes to our legal department, and the actual court proceeding is overseen by our legal department. So directly related to those 2.
So you're saying that that has helped the department move more cases?
Yes, as a result of the changes, we have seen 72% more youth achieve permanency, and that is always a good thing.
Thank you.
Mr. Hager.
Well, that was one of my questions. And I'm glad that worked out. It was a fairly contentious issue. It was an 8-7 vote. I believe, from what I recall, that we voted to put that underneath the county attorney. So I'm glad for the children, for the taxpayers, it's worked out well. Chris, you kept mentioning about the difference about a different judge. Who do we have more timeliness, less delays, less postponements?
I think one of the bigger changes that we've seen in the change in judges is just the willingness to look at different options. So for example, in the past, when family court judges are elected for a 10-year term, so for the last 10 years, for example, when we would identify relatives in school, then we go through that home study process that I talked about, we would present all of that information to the court, and the relative would opt to, I don't want to be a certified foster parent, I want to just have my grandchild placed in here, I want this.
Right.
And the court would often deny that and place them in the department's custody. And then we would have to go in and certify that relative as a foster parent in order for that to happen. With the change in judge, we've seen a much more of a willingness to allow that direct placement instead of having to go through that formal foster parent process.
Excellent. I supported that change also.
Well,
So just very briefly wrapping up, looking at the July 21 to July 22 changes in eligibility, we are right within the 5%, which is normal of ebb and flow for increases and decreases across all areas. Next month's services report will start to highlight really provide some more information in the areas of child support, adult protective, Medicaid, employment. But really wanted to highlight also the changes in the HEAP program, where we're going to see the additional applicants and those numbers increase, as well as to let the board know that we have seen double the amount of homeless individuals in the first half of 2022 compared to 2021. So services related to homeless individuals will also be something that I would expect to be on our report, as well as for you to see an increase compared with years past.
Mr. Fay,
These homeless individuals, are these new people coming into the county?
And not always,
The percentage going up with them?
the percentage of new individuals that are moving into the county. I could check and talk with our adult protective services supervisor just to see if they keep track of those statistics so that we know how many are St. Lawrence County residents and how many are not. Oftentimes, folks come into the county and are seeking perhaps just transportation to get to wherever they're going or get back to, where they came from, and we're able to assist them with that. Rather than perhaps provide long-term housing or short-term housing.
Thank you.
Is there a guesstimation for the number of homes in North Carolina?
There is, but I don't recall.
I know it's double, yeah, I know it's double.
Yeah.
Mr. Medali?
Just a question about how you define homeless, that just means it does not have a permanent address. How do we define what we characterize as being homeless?
For purposes of the data that we are providing, or the data that I'm referring to, homeless would be an individual that phones our on-call system or shows up at the department that does not have a legal residence, that does not have a place. Just wait to go.
Mr. Manish?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heather, geez, good question. And it's related. First question, do you think we're adequately staffed to handle the demand?
Actually, if I could possibly defer that question to Mr. Seaver, I know that just had a conversation with the supervisor regarding the onboarding of the normal keep caseworkers or eligibility folks for November when the heating season starts.
Okay, well, what I'll do then,
Yeah.
I'll hold my question.
Thank you.
What's up? Mr. Burke?
Are you seeing any changes in care for people who? Is there any
can't speak to the changes in regards to the percentage of cases connected to substance abuse without looking for that data specifically. But what I can say is we have definitely seen a change in the level of acuity, I guess you could say, or the needs of some of our youth, especially very young youth that are coming in, even becoming hospitalized for psychiatric issues at a very young age. So that I would say is something that we have seen, unfortunately, as a trend. Substance abuse, again, I would want to look at the data to see if we've actually seen an increase in the number of cases that have substance abuse connected to it. However, we have this whole allocation program and they are very busy constantly testing, going out, assessing, and providing services. So I have no doubt that our numbers are pretty high.
Well. Thank you very much.
So part of the importance, I think, and Chris Heather and many other staff, as well as Dylan, who've worked tirelessly to continue to pull together this data, figure out when it doesn't look the way that we're seeing the reports, tweak it endlessly, and that only will grow now because what our efforts over the next 12 months will look like is more to balance with the eligibility side of things and get information that is connected to the children's services that we provide, but from different perspectives. And I think Heather mentioned most of them. Commissioner will speak to those as well. But now we transition. We have a return visit from our folks at Bonadeo. Tim Ball is with us tonight and Josh Bills. Josh spent some time here meeting with staff, and Tim headed, as you may recall, Tim headed up the agency review. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for your patience.
Evening.
So Tim, thank you for coming back. Wondered if you just wanted to summarize for anyone who wasn't present, who joined us tonight, in terms of the overall takeaway from the St. Lawrence County Agency Review.
Well, you're putting me on the spot there. I didn't know we were going to start with that. Just a real quick, overall summary, just a comment first. I love to see all the data that Heather presented today. I think it's extremely important to see and to know that the agency is managing with the access of that data and continue to keep an eye on things. So that is good to see. As far as the overall summary is that the agency was open to the review, and we very much appreciate that. Almost all of the folks that we got a chance to interview or speak with, right up to the top to Heather, who we spoke with often, was extremely open and transparent to the review, and was helpful to us as we identified folks that we wanted to talk to, things that we needed to discuss, specific cases that we reviewed and we needed to ask questions about, right up to the data that we requested and the support that was provided for that data. So we're very appreciative of that and of the department doing that. We also experienced a significantly high level of folks that cared passionately about their job, and were pretty good at it. And I think that, and when you look specifically at the safety assessments of the children and the statistics and how it compares to the state, I think St. Lawrence has demonstrated specifically over the last year or two that when they prioritize something like that, they do a fantastic job of achieving that type of metric. So we were happy to see that. A couple main focus areas of the report, from our standpoint, were really sort of kind of high level. A lot of it was in documentation of policies and procedures, and really looking at the sort of the driving policies behind the management of a department that really deals with child and family welfare. And so one of our main recommendations was certainly to increase the sort of transparency and documentation of policies and procedures, and to create an infrastructure that updates them and revisits them regularly to ensure that they are in agreement with the protocols and procedures of the department, that they're accessible by employees, and that those are the types of documents and policies that they're using to train staff. I think that's really one of the main focus there is. The other was the conflict of interest policy, which is discussed at length. at the last meeting. The other area that we were able to provide some context in, which is important, is sort of staff level. There's really hard to sort of say, in a sense, especially in TPS work, like based on the number of calls and the number of children that are receiving care within the county, what's the right complement of workers to provide those services. And so we offered some data points to the county to look at how they can kind of look at their ongoing caseload and determine whether they're specifically right-sized. But some of those numbers that are in our report won't exactly agree with some of the statistics you saw today, because again, when we do that data, we start at 0 and we look at the number of the cases that come in and the number of people that were available or budgeted to provide the service on those cases within 60 days. You have to remember that some of that doesn't really bring in the fact that there are cases that were open when it started, and some of those cases are ongoing and continue to be complex. So you won't see such a quick turnaround in those caseloads with the right complement of staff, because they still have to clean up some of the backlog and some of the cases that still exist. Outside of that, again, I really want to be clear that we had really good cooperation and participation in the evaluation. I think our report that I'm sure has been read by this group stands up well. We're very, we're very, we're happy about the information that's in there. We can stand behind most of the data and the recommendations that we offered. Again, having conversations with your new commissioner, I was very pleased with sort of the reaction to the report and the idea that he and his staff are going to put together an action plan, which I understand he's going to talk about tonight. And I think that that's really, in summary, when we do these type of reviews, to have good participation by the county and by the employees, and to see the reaction that we've seen from management and leadership and taking those recommendations seriously, that's about the best you can do. And I'm happy to see that. And I'm excited to hear what the agency's response is going to be and what their plan going forward is going to be based on our report.
Any questions? No questions, Jim. You're lucky even.
Must have been a good summary.
Thank you for that, Tim. Appreciate it. And Josh, you as well, boots on the ground, taking the time to meet with everyone and get the work collected and reviewed. So much appreciated. With that, Commissioner, welcome you up here to speak to the corrective action plan, self-imposed, I will say, by Commissioner Sieber, taking, as Tim alluded to, taking very seriously the recommendations of on deal and putting them into what will be practiced. So, Commissioner?
Good evening, everyone. Before I start, I would like to extend my thanks to Heather and Chris and Dylan and all of my staff that worked to get the data to you. Putting everything together and then doing the year review was kind of a big lift, and in addition to the regular responsibilities. So I do want to recognize the effort they put forth. So thank you for that. So I have in front of me a corrective action plan to answer the recommendations contained in the report. There were 19 recommendations contained in the review, and they've taken a look, and I have an action plan for each one of them. We have divided them up pretty much with 30, 60, or 90-day anticipated completion dates. So this is something that we take very seriously. We're going to get working on. The majority of it we're already working on and have been for some time. And as I'm going to go over a couple of these, one of them is already completed and has been for some time. So I'm going to go ahead and start kind of giving you a summary. I'm sure you don't want me to read it word for word. It's 25 pages long, but I have it lined out in order for the report. So if you have any specific questions, I do have the page number noted here, so you can go back and cross-reference it if you so desire. I'm going to start with, I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to start with the key recommendation, which is on report page 45, which details consistency in department personnel fostering children. This is completed. We actually addressed this all the way back in April. One of the first things that I did when we got here is to look at some of these issues is we placed a moratorium on Department of Social Services employees fostering children. We are not doing that. We have not been doing that. We currently have one youth placed with a DSS employee. This youth is an out-of-county family member, so we have nobody fostering St. Lawrence County kids right now, and as Heather alluded to earlier, that home is actually going to be closed soon, so it's zero. One of the conditions of the moratorium is that the only instance that we would consider placing a child with a DSS employee is for emergency respite for a day or two only to find another resource, and that also only in the instance of all of the resources having been exhausted and with my individual approval for each case. So we are not in the business of doing that. It is a moratorium. Down the line, our situation changes and we've been doing the resources changes, we need to look at that again. But right now and for the foreseeable future, I believe the best thing to do is keep that moratorium in place. So that one's completed. We have a few that have a 30-day turnaround on them. And I timed everything. The anticipated completion dates is going to be 30 days from today. So when I give you 30 days, I don't mean from a couple of days ago, I mean from right now. The first of which is on recommendation number 4, that corresponds to page 13 in the report, dealing with civil service examiner for qualified candidates for hire. We are going to have our training coordinator explore expanding our internship program. The board has discussed this a couple times in recent meetings to try and find additional resources for us to draw qualified staff from. We're going to be working more with local colleges. We're going to explore options, as mentioned in the report, for possible provisions of loose capabilities for scholarships or other incentives. We're going to take a look at the financial side of that and ramifications and cost benefit analysis of that, as you will. We are currently hiring students to provide supervision of visitation, which was one of the required recommendations at the end of the report. We are already doing that. We will continue to do that and expand our efforts in doing so. We will be reaching out to universities also to offer opportunities for their research projects to be conducted here, and that will go along with the internship programs previously stated. And we are going to participate in job fairs, continue to do so. We've actually already got on schedule. We're going to be sending staff to spend a day at job fair in Oswego soon. So they're going to reach out a little bit. We're going to think outside the box and do what we can to try to attract qualified candidates. I would love to say that all of our people should be from St. Lawrence County. I'm looking to find those opportunities for people here. But the reality is that we need to reach outside the area, the local area, and we are prepared to do so. Again, anticipated correction date is September 15th to have all of these things in place. The next one, also the 30-day turnaround, would be corresponding for work from home prohibition on page 16 of the report that you have. We are in the process of setting up and initiating some meetings. We're going to be reaching out to the county administrator and human resources, our union leadership, to see if we can look at a position that we can present to you, the board, to see where we're at in terms of the work from home prohibition. If you recall in the report, there was a pretty extensive case that they laid out detailing the benefits of such. So we are going to take a long look at that and see if we can do that to help with the numbers, retaining staff and attracting staff. Also, with a 30-day turnaround, this is the 13th recommendation of the report, which corresponds to page 43, is the documentation of child placement. Some of the issues that we had listed was formalizing the documents of how we're placing kids and what processes are doing so. So we are creating a template, a form that's going to be created that will address all of the items that are listed here, including the case name, number, and address, children's name, date of birth, names of relative others identified as possible placements, anything that the report recommended, we are actually going to incorporate into that template and expect that to be completed by September 15th. Looking out a little bit farther to our 60-day turnaround on some of these, the first of which I'm going to present to you It's actually the first recommendation I have about the conflict of interest policy. We are putting together a work group to identify policy-related issues, not just the conflict of interest, but any other policy-related issues that appear in the report. And once we come up with suitable policies, we're going to have them reviewed by the county attorney. When that's done, we'll be presenting it to all of the staff and have them sign off on the technology, make sure they're trained yearly on the policy and post it to be the soon-to-be created central policy repository. It's one of the things that was noticed in his report. Staff seem confused on where to find all policies. It's easy to have them because we have policies from the CFS, from OTDA that are relevant to the department and not necessarily the other county departments. So to have all of those in one place for our staff, that obviously make it a little bit smoother. So we are looking to have that completed in 60 days. We have a work group set up for this. The people that are on the work group are actually the security plan. Are we going to be sharing something? So yeah, so we have a copy of this to go back to. Second recommendation from the plan corresponding to page 12 in the report deals with onboarding and training. We're going to be formalizing all of our training team members' positions and roles. The general memorandum that will be put out. We're going to continue to review our existing training tools to make sure they sufficiently address any issues we have related to casework performance and the readiness to assume the caseloads. And all of our existing training protocols are going to be reviewed and revised to reflect a thorough integration for a training plan detailing how the caseworkers will receive this, and then become part of the rotation. So we're looking to have that completed in 60 days. Also on page 12 of the report is a recommendation for caseloads for newly hired CPS workers. Our training coordinator, Ms. Catherine Reinbold, is going to be reaching out to other similarly sized local departments of social service to determine best practices. We're going to adopt those best practices as long as they work for St. Lawrence County. And those practices will be adopted in the training protocol review I just mentioned for the previous recommendation. Moving on to, sorry, I have everything in order as in the previous report, but that's not how chronologically. Page 20 of the report talks about the use of personal mobile technology. I have Mr. Young, who is my IT coordinator. He's presented some numbers to me. If I got them today, I haven't had a chance to go over them. But to take a look at the most efficient way and fiscally sound way for us to make sure that we're using technology appropriately, particularly so that staff are not required to use the personal items, and make sure we're providing the right technology for the staff to get the job done efficiently. We have a plan for that we're working on. And hopefully, once we get the right technology decided upon, the right fiscal point, make sure that all our caseworkers are going to provide with what they need, a county remote device. Caseworkers in the field, they have these to take pictures, they have these to communicate. And our current county policy prohibits staff from using the personal device to do so. So we need to set our staff up to succeed. Page 21 of the report deals with communication and direct involvement in various school districts, something that we've all already discussed previously in this body. We're going to at least biannually provide trainings to the county school districts regarding our roles and what the reporting protocols are for them to include training on child protective services, preventive services, and foster care services. This training may be offered either in person or virtually. We want to make sure that they understand our roles. I think there have been times in the past when our staff have been in the schools and the school personnel have not necessarily understood exactly what we were there for. So we want to make sure we're utilizing their and our time appropriately. And we're also going to be generating some documents to record casework productivity in the schools, so we can take a look at trends to see what our involvement, how that affects the number of reports, if it does affect it, and what direction that goes. So we'll be gathering some metrics in that. On page 35 of the report, There were recommendations regarding grading supervisor and the deputy commissioner, track rate of fast completion. By the way, I would also like to take this moment to announce I have selected the deputy commissioner. And he will be coming on board on September 20th. So we're excited for that addition to the team. Within 60 days, our fast completion date is going to be reviewed at least monthly by the grading supervisor and or the director of services. And it's going to be, we're going to make sure that it's reviewed and provided in case conferences, also covering information regarding home visit, safety assessment, support work. And all will be documented on the case conference sheets and connections. I think part of the, and you've noticed this, I'm sure, the underlying trend in the report had to do with documentation and timeliness of documentation and completeness of documentation. When you look at the foster care and services side of the house, there are no hard deadlines for the majority of the documentation. They just say, you know, make sure you get it done, and here are some best practices. There are no hard and fast deadlines. We want to make sure we're adopting those best practices, gathering the appropriate documentation in a timely manner, and make sure that there's any connections. So if there's a review, we don't have to go back and say, well, it's been done, but it hasn't been entered yet. We're going to work on modifying those work habits and work practices to ensure that we are staying on task and on target. The next 60-day item we have corresponds to page 35 of the report, establishing an internal protocol for specific case actions. To address this every month, at least monthly, the director of services and the grading supervisor in that area are going to review the timeliness of all documentation, including the progress notes and the connections. As I mentioned, that is an underlying theme here. We recognize that we've been working on it. We've been discussing it with the supervisors. During biweekly case conferences, we're going to have the grading supervisors in each unit develop written home visit expectations for individual cases to provide that written guidance to their caseworkers who are going out to the field. And the grading supervisors are going to ensure that the safety assessments are thoroughly and appropriately documented in case notes. And we're going to work with our supervisors. They have a large task in front of them, and we're going to make sure they have the resources and training that they need, and the guidance to help them achieve these goals. We have a couple more on the 60-day term. Corresponding to page 48 of the report deals with Title 4E determinations. We had some issues with that. Court orders maybe not having proper language, making it difficult to make a 4E determination for funding. Our action on that is going to be that we're going to be training all the legal staff that are coming in. I think we're going to be having some new staff in this soon. And then we're going to provide regular training in that regard. And I will be appointing an individual that is not part of the determination process to do an independent review, at least semi-annually, to make sure that the cases are reviewed appropriately, that funding is assigned appropriately, and see if there are any trends identified in that area. The last 60-day item corresponds to page 54 of the report, dealing with the cost and effectiveness of our relationship with Children's Home Jefferson County. I think this Mr. Burks was here in the question earlier a little bit. We are assigning a work group to analyze the costs and identify the fiscal efficiencies. We understand, and it was very clear in the report, that there is a discrepancy in the amount that we pay for bed rate versus what the Children's Home Jefferson County pays. So we're going to take a look at that. This group is going to meet following this at least semi-annually, provide reports to me, detailing their findings to include recommendations on improving efficiencies. It's a long-standing relationship we have with Children's Home Jefferson County. And I think that there are opportunities for us to hopefully down the line increase the number of available foster homes we have in our county and deal with it in county rather than utilize an external agency. I don't have an answer for it right now, but we are going to put it together and work on that. So we have a few that are termed for a 90-day turnaround, first of which corresponds to page 18 in the report dealing with the centralized audit and review of policies and procedures. We're putting working together to review our policies and to create a central repository for all of our policies. We need to go through them all to make sure that they've all been reviewed appropriately. They're all current, that they are not referring to things that don't apply anymore. And then generate some documents that are going to ensure regular review, availability of the staff. As I spoke to earlier, make sure that everybody knows where they can find them and have that access to help them do their jobs. Also, the 90-day turnaround. Corresponding to page 49 report, dealing with child movements, events, and foster home certification tracking. We had a formal work group, it is listed here. We'll be working to consolidate our existing forms, take a look at all of the things that we do, make sure that we are doing it as efficiently possible. And then we're going to work to create a key event database or tracking system so that when a child is moved from placement to placement, it's reflected everywhere, not just in this part of the chart, but not in that part of the chart, to make sure that everything is documented appropriately, and eliminating questions that would regard to child movement. And the last item, the 90-day turnaround, is case coding and tracking at corresponding page 51 in your report. Again, we have a work group put together that's going to be consolidating the forms and spreadsheets. We're looking at consolidating our Title 4E, our EAS spreadsheets into one master document. I think part of the issue is we have a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of spreadsheets in each area that probably document very well what's happening in their area, but they don't speak to each other. We need to make sure that we have a document where everything can be entered and everything speaks to each other, so we don't have discrepancies from page to page or area to area or unit to unit. So the speed work group will be designed to alleviate that. Do we have any questions? We had one more, I'm sorry, I see another tab. And this one is ongoing, and it is corresponding to page 45 of your report dealing with supervised visitation. One of the documentation is that we take a look at possibly adding additional staff, additional FTEs to assist us with supervised visitation. A lot of our visitation is done by volunteers or with the youth advocacy program, not by our staff. We have hired some students in the past to do that. One of the things that I'm going to be presenting to you later on, vacancy, there's positions to fill one vacancy and abolish and create another position to assist us with this visitation. The visitation being key to a successful foster care program. And this is ongoing. We've been having meetings with the youth advocacy program, and just recently we're going to be setting up regular meetings to discuss these issues. And hopefully, with your assistance, we can get at least one additional position there to take care of this, and then we'll be evaluating as we go on to see what our needs are to ensure that we're providing the proper opportunities for supervision, visitation, and experience. Yes, sir.
So in correspondence with that, you have problems with your volunteer drivers too, which is impact visitation. How are you addressing that?
I'm hoping that these positions can help us out with that. I mean, we have to look at the reality that we are kind of resource strapped in the county, not just in this area, that every department I think has issues, hiring staff. I directly went out of business the other day because all the staff walked off. It's something that everybody's kind of looking at. I'm hoping that these additional positions can help us in that as well. They'll give me the opportunity to take a look at the staffing that we have, reassign people if need be to meet the needs that we have, try to start shuffling some pieces around, and evaluate it as we go. But I think this will, I think this homemaker position we're talking about will possibly help us in that.
Are these drivers letting anybody know, or they're just not showing up, or what's happening here?
I don't have any data on the frequency of that happening right now. I check with supervisors, see how often it happens. I don't think it happens as often as we would think. I think we have a pretty well dedicated group of volunteers. There are going to be times when things do come up for people, and even with the other staff that we have, our partnership advocacy program as well. That things do come up, but I don't foresee that as being a huge problem.
I've had some complaints. That's
Okay.
why.
I'll be happy to hear about it.
Well, just that, super driver didn't show up, so then they lost out on the visitation.
Understand.
I think Ruth had mentioned we used to have 210 volunteer drivers. We're down to 70 or something of that nature across the county.
Yeah.
So we're down to a third. I understand. But it's an issue. It's the visitation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That's why I had this remarks on it.
Your action plan is very comprehensive. I have a question on, you document what? Go into
Document which item,
a, like,
specific.
caseworkers, all paper.
There's some paper bubble, everything gets entered into connections. So we do have one, in terms of the casework itself, that was into connection, which is a statewide program.
And are you able to track for completion of, I mean, is that a tool for your management, your supervisors? The, whose notes are current, whose notes aren't? Second question. Sure. When you look at technology, phones, will you be looking at anything that would enhance the basic? I mean, most of these workers, people that go to home, go as individuals, they don't go in teams. Is that something that you take a look at, or maybe when you're benchmarking with other agencies?
Yeah, absolutely. Take a look at that. Right now we're looking at iPhones. So that staff are having to use their own personal devices, take their pictures and communication purposes as well. Are you talking about
Well, I mean, in an office setting, alert you, staff, I don't know whether it's. But it would seem to me that.
I'll be happy to take Let's still on my phone.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I got a couple questions today that started on. One of the things I want to share with them on. The report. And I thought it was well done. The only great I've been reading, the only question I had was what were we going to do to get at the identified issues. I specifically talked about 36 and 90, and you've got it. And you've got things identified, and I firmly believe that you can't improve that which you don't measure. And we've got the measurements in there. I think it's going to work out well. What I had was on the heat. 3 questions. The first one: do we currently have enough staff, or if not?
So I have had that conversation. I've had some conversations with our heads and there's been a lot more applications and student changes in the eligibility requirements. We've had some preliminary conversations about possibly looking at staffing and needing some additional positions. I have some vacancy requests that have been submitted to me that I need to talk to the county administrator about to see about maybe moving some people around or some positions in that area, because I do believe we will need some additional help in that area. It's going to be a lot more volume.
Yeah, I believe you're spot on. We know, you're looking at the history, we know how many applicants we typically have. Have you been able to make projections on the extra number of applicants based on the response?
The changes to eligibility are fairly recent, so I haven't been able to track any trends in that regard. Change of the seasons as well, so things are gonna change, we're gonna be changing the cooling, the heating. So I don't have that data for you right now, but I will do what I can.
Okay, that would be it. That would be great. And, I'll say you've already talked about the eligibility levels, that was one of my questions, so, thank you.
Sure. Well. Mr. Akers,
Of the, on the mobile phone or the personal devices, the current policy is not to be utilized. Now, how can you enforce that?
very difficult. It's a situation where, we have a situation here that's existed for some time that needs to be addressed. I don't really have an answer, but I can't enforce that right now, because I can't expect the staff to be in the field. We're not providing the equipment they need. A phone, the iPads that they have are equipped with they have SIM cards in them to be used as phones. But the app that we use is not always reliable. And I think that issuing each phone we costs a very small amount more than we're already paying.
Well, my only thing is, some of these situations are very personal, to your family, of drama. Real drama, not fake stuff. They're not making this up. So what we need to ensure is that everything that is actually taking place, whether it's a dialogue between a caseworker, a biological parent, or termination of parental rights, that is on the record. That's the hard part, because you have adversarial parties here, and then they're maybe accusing one of, say, a caseworker not working on their behalf and working in a different direction, and being accused of using a personal mobile phone. That's a hell of a challenge to figure out. How do you determine that?
I haven't actually had to address the mobile phone issue yet. Mr. Young, my IT director, actually delivered me some numbers today to see what we can do to rectify that. And I'll get to Ms. Doyle here tomorrow. Just after our meeting, going back to my office, they were waiting for me to ask. So it is something that we need to address. Unified report is an issue. I want to make sure that we pick the right tack to make sure it's set up the right technology.
Will there be any punitive methods or anything like that? For example, a third party says, hey, this actually happened, what involved one of your workers or whatever. That would have to actually turn into a criminal matter or say something happened when you react because of some information. This is all hypothetical. So I'm just thinking, we would have to subpoena that person's records, their personal phone records. And say, for example, it did indeed actually record this call actually had taken place. Would there be any punitive measures?
I mean, if you're talking about a criminal matter, I honestly believe that our staff are out there in the field and they're acting in good faith and doing what they need to do. In the instances where they have had to use their personal phone to take pictures, I don't believe that our staff are going to do that in a malicious manner. And if our staff are acting in the best interest of the child, best interest of the families, I will stand behind them 100%.
So currently, right now, not everybody has access to the technology.
Yes, they have iPads
Okay.
that have the SIM card.
Okay. So they can take photos or whatever.
The use of personal phones, if it has happened, has been mostly for documenting pictures. So it hasn't been recording video or anything audio. Okay. We do have a few. We have some.
Okay.
I just don't have enough for everybody.
Great. Lots of questions. Thank you.
Mr. Schneider.
And at page 16, and the diagram of according to the county office team, this is the only place that input information. Now we have a office in Ogdensburg that was recently used, and if you comment on communication or sharing of information, do you feel that that's adequate? Obviously, we can't, and we, without a possibility of getting over the offices, state and seeing. So that would make this diagram either a moot point. Do you see the satellite offices as being valuable? Would you like to agree with me?
Oh, I absolutely believe that the satellite office see some really good successes with our staff out there, being in the community. It gives our staff opportunities to come into the office to enter their data. See, the part of the issue that we have here is our prohibition on remote work. This diagram and this portion is put together as part of this report as an illustration of how rather than making the staff member drive into Ogdensburg or Messina or Canton to our office to give them the opportunity to enter their data elsewhere as a remote work situation. Obviously, I see the value in the satellite offices. I think the more satellite offices that we had, the more likely that staff are going to be in that vicinity to report. But I don't want to take away from the recommendation that whether we have offices in Messina, Ogdensburg, Canton, Starlink, or wherever we'd like to, we can still save time and efficiency with our staff according to this report, by allowing them the opportunity to enter some of these things out.
That's the issue with the state voter.
Absolutely.
Mr. Burke, you got your hand up?
Joe, will you be sharing your plan with OCFS? And might they offer some support?
I'm sure.
And how about reimbursement for any of the initiatives?
I have to take a look at. I honestly couldn't tell you right now. So there's so many different layers to this.
Training in particular is one that I was thinking of. You know, if I know you're going to use some of your own staff, but if you needed outside training, it would be good to have if they would
Absolutely.
share some of the costs.
Yeah, we'll definitely, as we're looking for training resources, we will definitely be looking for funding sources for that as well.
Thank you.
Well, if you want to see the commissioner in action, I suggest that any of you that are home on Monday mornings at 10 o'clock, you might want to tune into his meeting with the supervisor. I have been fortunate enough to be allowed to sit in on them, and it's a pretty good experience. There's a lot of back and forth, and see that there is a lot more. Really don't know how to put it. I won't say interest, but participation by the supervisors in the DSS. And a concern about what goes on there. With the thought of trying to make it better. And I think your leadership there, at least from what I've seen for the past couple of months, has gone a long way to boost that level. And please keep up with it. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your time, as well as your staff. And Chris, who's last name.
That's I certainly appreciate it. Oh, yes, yeah. So we were noticed last visit on the audit was Thursday. Last week, an audit, the state is, OCFS is looking at different counties around the state that have overdue investigations. So we were selected to be part of the audit. They've requested us to provide an action plan to them on how we're going to be closing those cases. Fortunately, the majority of the items that we're going to be doing and we've sent to them, we're already doing. We're already requiring each maybe supervisor to get a plan for every one of the caseworkers on what they're going to be doing that week in terms of how many overdue cases are going to be closing. We've had a large number of them
that have been closed on our end. They're not going to show up in state statistics because they, you know, when we close them, it goes off to OCFS and they have to determine, is more work required? Do we kick it back? Is this, are we going to close? But we have had on our end, if they accept the cases that my staff closed and sent over the last month or so, they closed close to 100 overdue cases. We will be down in the 240s instead of up in the 350s as the state has shown. So our staff have been working very hard. They've been doing a tremendous job. We're just waiting to hear back from OCFS on the final closure of those cases. But that all kind of, everything kind of came together kind of serendipitously this week when they hit us with that audit. And Mr. Rand was able to jump on it and get the action plan over to them as well. Great job.
I think just to that end, as you know, when we talked quite a bit about safety assessments, that's one of the 3 metrics. The second metric is that overdue cases. And then the last one you're seeing come down one, I think, each the last 3 months of heading towards that less than 15 cases. So those 3 main metrics, we're seeing tremendous progress by the department, by Children's Services, and certainly we're working hard to meet those metrics.
Mr. Akers?
Mr. Seaver, when cases are closed, does the supervisor provide oversight? There's pressure on to get these cases closed.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm hoping that, you know, that people are being sensed that they're being rushed, that they're still being thoroughly done.
We're being thorough. Nobody's doing this much. You know, one of the things that we're asking our staff to do is to prioritize the cases. You know, closing the easy ones, closing the ones that had the majority of the work. You have a situation, for example, if a caseworker resigns quickly, and those cases are just left there, then another caseworker has to absorb. The downside of that is to do that, you have to wait over if that person who left was not contemporaneous in entering their notes, and somebody else has to do it for them, and they're not fluent with the case. So now they've got to go back out and make the contacts over again. Everything that they have to do, so it will be time. Supervisors are definitely making sure that we're doing it right. Nobody wants to have those picked back because that's just extra work. So we're making sure we do it right.
Anyone else?
Any final thoughts, Tim or Josh, before we sign off with you?
My final thought is just I'm pleased by the plan presented. I think it covers all the areas of the report. Again, great to see an agency react in the way, look at those as formal recommendations and create plans. I do think that the plan is very, very good, very ambitious. And I would ask for some patience with your commissioner as he attempts to implement these, because some of those 30 and 60 days, those are going to be tough. I'll give you, but it's great to see the aggressiveness. I love it. So just really happy with the plan. Good to see. That's my first time seeing eyes on what the plan's going to be. So appreciate being included today and getting to see what the agency is going to do.
Thank you. Here's one more coach.
No. Okay, so make sure you don't run away. Resolution time. 21. Moving along, we'll go directly to resolution. First one is authorizing the chair to sign a memorandum of understanding with Community Health Center of North Country Corporation for the provision of the consumer-directed personal assistance program in the Department of Social Service. Moved by Mr. Delisha, seconded by Ms. Curran. Any discussion? So,
Good evening again. Now I'm just going to talk about another microphone. This resolution basically allows us to be the umbrella for the Community Health Center of North Country for this program. The program provides funding directly from the state to the program. It doesn't go through us. There's no fiscal outlay for us. There's no labor required on our part. And the program allows people who are dealing with in-home care to have greater latitude in selecting care providers. For them to operate, they need to have the umbrella of the local Department of Social Services. So this resolution just allows us to work with that.
Any questions? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, what's your name? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening.
Move to community services. Jay, good evening.
Good evening.
We have a resolution setting business hours for the St. Lawrence County Community Service Opioid Treatment Program. Moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Forsythe. Go ahead, Jay.
So this is simply a resolution seeking board legislator approval for the hours of operation for the OTP clinic as per the OASIS regulations.
Questions? Mr. Akers.
Dave, the last time we talked, Saturday was like an open question. How did you resolve this?
In terms of what?
Getting personnel on Saturday.
Well, it's my understanding that we're still working on an MOU with CSEA for that. Up to this point, we've been using predominantly management confidential staff to cover the Saturday dosing hours from 7 in the morning till noon.
And how many clients do we have at the clinic now?
We have 36.
Thank you.
Johnny Dorothy.
The MOA is complete and we're set for the Saturday hours. We have a process in place.
Thank you.
When will we see that? Being the board. Huh? All right. All in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Opposed? Here. Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract for funding from OASIS Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant, Comprehensive Integrated Outpatient Treatment Program funds, and modifying the 2022 budget for community services. Moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Ms. Curran. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so this was a competitive grant that we applied for the continued integration of the OTP in the existing Article 32 clinic. It was an award of $250,000. There's a lot of kind of miscellaneous stuff, kind of fill in the blanks, but in terms of the big ticket items, there was $50,200 that we are slated to, if this is approved, slated to use against the cost of the flooring for our suite in the Human Services Center. We had originally put a resolution through to use DSRIP money, which was unrestricted funding that we received when we were creating the primary care clinic and we met the deliverables. So what we would do is we would supplant that funding and use this new grant award for that half of that purpose, which is half of it being for the OASIS side of the flooring. The other big ticket item would be for a generator system. And it's my understanding that the county is applying for a building-wide generator system for the Human Services Center. If they're awarded that, it's my understanding that there is a county match. So we could possibly use this $90,000 towards that match. And if we don't get the award, then the fallback would be just to have a generator specific to the OTP so that we can dose and see client records in the event of a power outage.
Questions? Comment? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign 2 contracts with New York State Governor's Traffic Safety Committee to accept the 2022 and 2023 traffic safety program and child passenger safety grants. Moved by Ms. Curran, seconded by Mr. Forsythe and Mr. Fay. Go ahead, Jay.
So this is a resolution authorizing the chair to sign these contracts and accept the monies. The first is the traffic safety grant. A significant portion of that goes towards the traffic safety specialist salary and fringe. But then they then do a lot of trainings, community trainings, information campaigns on bike safety, teenage driving, road safety in general. And then the $10,000 and 520 is for the child passenger safety, which pays for the seats, the infant car seats, as well as fitting and also training for the fitters at those fitting events.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Jay, you have updates.
I do, thank you. So if you look, the first thing that jumps out at you is the no-show rate across the board was 17.4%. So that's a 2.6% increase from the prior month. And unfortunately, since July 18th, our call reminder system has not been working like it should be with the new electronic health record. So, you know, we've got work orders in or tickets in to try to get that fixed. So that may have affected our productivity for this month. Although given the numbers in comparison to other times when we didn't have the call reminder system, it's not that significantly lower, but is slightly lower. So for instance, you know, the average addiction services was 5.05. Last month it was 5.5, but the prior month was 4.8. The overall averages were at 5.6. In June, we were at 5.9. In May, we were at 5.7. But what is not reflected in this report is the OTP has a separate module as part of the electronic health record. And it doesn't have quite the same reporting functions as just the regular Article 31 and Article 32 clinics. So we really struggled this month to try to include, you know, the impact of providing additional services to the OTP that would account for some of the lower numbers in the addictions Article 32 treatment side. And we weren't able to do that. So that's a work in progress in terms of continuing to give accurate reports that, you know, are apples to apples. So some of the lower productivity numbers on the addiction side doesn't account for the 36 patients that were continued to be served, that some of those, about 30 of those, came internally and were transferred over to the OTP and would, from here moving forward, be accounted on that productivity report once we can manage to try to get accurate numbers with the new system. In terms of, if you'll look, the prescriber visits for 7 hours, we're down to 2 prescribers. We did lose the mental health, predominantly mental health prescriber who left the agency. The locum tenens did start on August 8th. So we did get her oriented into the electronic health record, and she is seeing patients. So we'll have some numbers for that next month moving forward. In terms of the wait list, it says there's 3 for addiction services. There's now 1, and that individual has an appointment appointment within 2 days from today's date. We do have 24 on the mental health side. We put the task one of the support staff to try to reach out to the people that were on the waiting list. 11 of those who were able to be contacted said they did not want to be seen by another provider and they wanted to remain on our wait list. So that was 11. 3 were willing to get reconnected. And so I guess the outlet for that currently would be St. Joe's, because they recently hired a new counselor, so they do have some capacity. And then 10 other ones we tried to contact, we have yet to have a response. So are there any questions on that, on the wait list?
No scanning, Jay.
Okay. The numbers did drop for April, and I looked at April's update report that we give you. Really couldn't figure out why it dropped that much. I mean, there was a little bit of an increase in the no-show rate, but it really wouldn't have accounted why it did dip to those numbers. But it does ebb and flow, between months. And then the billing fell off slightly, but as I reported last month, I mean, this is a real-time number, or this is a snapshot. The 87.47% is a snapshot, but in terms of real time, that number continues to change as we continue to go after denials. Self-pays come in. Some of the people at the time, we didn't have the accurate insurance information on file. And once we found that information, we were able to rebill for services. So this is, these percentages in terms of the number paid is really a moving target.
Comments, questions? Mr. Burke?
Jay, are we still on track to have mobile?
I'm sorry, John, you were breaking up.
Are we still on track to have mobile services?
Well, we just had a meeting with Matthews Specialty Vehicle, and they are saying that they are not going to be able to meet the September delivery date, and they're pushing it back to November. So we've reached out to the funding source and trying to set up a meeting with them to see what their reaction to that news is going to be in terms of, possibly extending, the payment period for the grant. But we have yet to know. But it has been pushed back, by the manufacturer of the vehicle due to COVID, supply chain shortages.
Thank you, Jay.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else, Jay, no further questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next, we'll go to public health with Jolene Munder. Jolene, the first resolution is authorizing the chair to sign contracts with contractors, subcontractors, and consultants for the overdose data to action grant for the public health department. Moved by Ms. Curran, seconded by Mr. Smithers. Go ahead, Jolene.
Thank you. So last month we had done the resolution to accept the funding for this grant. So this month it's to redo our contracts with all of our subcontractors and our contractors and consultants for the final year of the grant. So our focus is going to be on doing different public service announcements with local providers. The first couple of years of the grant, we used Tony Hoffman, and we are still able to use the ones that we have done with him, but we are looking to do more local ones with our groups. We are also going to be doing additional harm reduction kits. And these include the Narcan, fentanyl test strips, CPR mask, gloves, educational material. And then as alongside with the kits, we will be also purchasing fentanyl test strips so that users can replenish their kits without having to get a whole new kit. And that is a big thing for us. With this, just a couple of numbers for you, so you have it. In 2020, the total number of overdoses that were put into ODMAP, which is a system that got started around the end of 2018, implemented and introduced to law enforcement in 2019, and then really got put on hold in 2020. So 2020 numbers are a little bit low because it's the first year law enforcement really started using it. But we had 46 overdoses in 2020. Of those, 10 were fatal and 31 had naloxone administered. 2021, we had 62 overdoses reported into ODMAP. Only 2 were fatal and 44 doses of naloxone were administered. So far for 2022, we've had 43 overdoses, 5 have been fatal, and 22 doses of naloxone have been administered so far this year. And this is just what's been reported into overdose mapping. One of the things that we will continue to work on with some of our partners this year will be to increase the number of people that are reporting into the overdose mapping system. So this resolution will allow us to work with all of our contractors and subcontractors for the final year.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Knowledge Capital Alliance for EMSG Dashboard Performance Management System. Moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Ms. Curran. Go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you. So public health is going to be working on public health accreditation through the Public Health Accreditation Board. And one of the requirements for accreditation is to have a performance management system in place. So the first step towards this for us is going to be getting the performance management system. VMSG is a public health specific performance management system. They have a sole source provider. And then the annual cost, that the quote, it was for 25 users, but it's $100 per person. So this year we will start off less than the $2,500 because we'll just start with supervisors and the quality people in it to get the system built. And then next year, as we go through the accreditation work, we'll bring on more of the department and then more of our programs until all of our projects are within the system.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Jolene, unless you have anything further, we're all set.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Legislator Reagan, would you like to present this resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to present a resolution calling on New York State Climate Action Council to craft a final scoping document that reflects the different climate zones and wealth in the state, and that no action be taken to reduce or ban any energy sources until reliable energy sources that have been proven safe and affordable are in place.
There's a second by Mr. Forsythe and Mr. Peck. What comment on the schedule?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The resolution is pretty straightforward while lengthy in that we have this state panel that is made up of unelected special interests who are looking at applying their views on how the world should be to the people of New York State. And there are people in state government who have already taken steps to reduce access to fuels like natural gas to people in some parts of the state. It is extremely important that before this Climate Action Council adopts any final recommendations to the state legislature, that they stop and think about a couple of things. One is that a one-size-fits-all approach is bad for the people of New York State, that we have a lot of different kinds of energy sources in New York State that we ought to be using and ought to be allowed to continue using. And it's incredibly important that someone take into account affordability. Here in St. Lawrence County, we have very high poverty. We have low per capita income. We have families that are struggling. We have to take into account their needs. And the last thing we need to do at this point, where the state is already wrestling with high energy costs, it's already wrestling with high inflation, is already wrestling with a host of problems, is to shoot ourselves in the foot once again by banning various energy sources, or recommending the reduction in the use of various energy sources that have been proven to be reliable, have been proven to be available. And this resolution will bring to their attention the need to take a step back and think about what it would really cost to force people to heat their homes with electricity. I mean, some of us in this room are old enough to remember when the idea of heating your home with electricity was considered a great idea. And many of us remember what happened. It didn't work out so well. And, you know, the notion that we can go to some other way of doing things as opposed to letting normal people make decisions about their lives and how they're going to live their lives, that's something that the people of New York State have a right to make those determinations, and this climate council or any other group needs to be reminded that their priority ought to be the needs of the poor, the working people, the regular people of New York State who have a right to access to affordable energy.
Mr. Ganesh.
I would also like to be added to the proposed sponsor.
I would also like to be added.
Oh. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Agency review.
We have one vacancy to be presented to you tonight and abolish and create from public health. Hello again.
Hello.
Go ahead.
So, we would like to abolish our account clerk typist and create a senior account clerk. As the last couple of years have shown, we are getting more grants, but also our programs are becoming more complicated with what our reporting requirements are and what state aid is. So as we recently vacated a senior account clerk because the person took a promotion within social services. So we promoted our account clerk typist to a senior account clerk. So now instead of filling that account clerk typist, we would like to have abolished that for the senior account clerk.
Questions for Jolene? Okay, thank you, Jolene.
Thank you.
All the other departments, tonight, two vacancies to present for you. Joe, come on back up. In case you haven't heard enough about social services on this fine evening. We've got two, one fill and one abolish and create.
Thank you. First position is a homemaker position. I alluded to this earlier when we were talking about visitation. This position is used to help us supervise family visitation, assist us in our efforts to enhance our ability to assist foster care families we have in St. Louis County, and reduce our reliance on volunteers.
Questions for Commissioner on this one?
Second position is also a homemaker position, and as I mentioned earlier, this is an abolish and create. We are looking at abolishing a position that had not been filled. Creating this one, as this is on the report, recommending that we adjust the number of deputies we have assigned to visitation. This position will allow us to do that and help us enhance our services for foster care in the St. Louis.
Any questions on this policy creating both in the early report and this vacancy? Information about your burden and duty is.
Thank you.
That concludes vacancy.
How it's time for
Yes, a few items to give you an update. We have been a couple of months now without a COVID update. So not to belabor the information, but I asked Jolene, first I asked her for how many folks took the opportunity at the St. Louis County Fair to be vaccinated. As you may recall, we did the 6-month-old to the 5-year-old population, and we had 3. Had 2 first dose and 1 second dose provided. However, there have been changes over the weekend with regard to quarantining. I asked for her with school coming, with a number of things happening, just to give us a brief update on what she sees changing. Jolene?
Thank you. So late Thursday afternoon, the CDC made some updates to COVID guidance for community members only. So this does not affect the healthcare guidance, and it does not affect congregate settings, which include correctional facilities, nursing homes, homeless shelters, and those places. So this is just for the community settings. They are no longer recommending a quarantine if you have been exposed, and this is whether you are vaccinated, boosted, or unvaccinated. We are working towards that point that we said we've been trying to get to, where we are not quite considering it endemic, but working on getting it to be endemic, so treating it similar to other infectious diseases. So there is no quarantine. If you are exposed, the recommendation is that you do wear a mask for the 10 days after your exposure. And then if you develop symptoms, you should test on day 5. If you test positive, the guidance has not changed. So it is still a 5-day isolation period. And then if your symptoms have resolved, you're fever free, or are resolving and you're fever free for 24 hours, day 6 through 10, you can go back to doing your regular activities, but still wearing a surgical mask or higher when you're out around other people. So that is a big change. The other changes have come for the school guidance. So the CDC has taken away the recommendations to cohort and test to stay and all of the quarantine that goes with the schools. So that's a good step that we're working towards there. Same thing though, if you have a positive individual in the school, they should be isolating and wearing a mask when they come back to school. And as always, if somebody is immunocompromised, you're going to be around somebody that's immunocompromised, wear your mask. And depending on what settings you're in, businesses do still have the right to require masks inside. That is a right that goes to the business as an employer. So just be cognizant of where you are and respecting the people around you with their choice if they're choosing to wear a mask, not to criticize them or ask them, why are you wearing a mask? Because there could be a multitude of reasons for why somebody still has one on.
Any questions for Jolene?
During vaccination, what, how long are they good?
I'm sorry,
That one, 2021, how long? would it be?
was it how long are vaccinations good for?
Yep.
So that is going to depend on a few different factors. People have the different antibodies, and if you've had COVID and been vaccinated, you have longer protection than you would if you just have it. It also goes to what type of underlying health conditions that you have. Most likely what we're going to end up seeing with COVID is something similar to the flu, where you end up with a booster shot on an annual basis. They are still working on updating the booster shot for this fall to come out with a vaccine that has the strains more similar to what we're seeing currently versus what we had when the first vaccines were created back in 2020. So it will most likely be similar to the flu.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Well,
And thank you, Jolene. Appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Also, just wanted to give you sort of the final tally of the senior picnic that was held. I think there was a little bit of trepidation going into the event, uncertain of how seniors would take to coming back together. There were 225 served and over 50 volunteers. So once the meals started coming out, everyone's fed within 12 and 15 minutes. They had some live music following that. You probably saw a nice piece that Channel 7 did, talking to seniors about this reintroduction and the movement back together. I think everyone has a great afternoon, and that's true for us, the volunteers. Wanted to let you know that we are moving forward with the healthcare bonus. I think it's around in a few different ways. Johnny is working to spearhead the impacted departments. There are a number of criteria, and of course, it would be complex and complicated to establish the thresholds with which these have to be evaluated. It has to be in place, reported by September 2nd. At this time, we believe there's approximately 30 to 40 titles involved. We do know that some of the associations, like NISHO, are working to get all titles in public health recognized for this type of bonus. At this time, that is not the case. But she will be working with the impacted departments, and this will go forward through March 31st of 2024. So we'll keep you posted as those get completed and what those numbers look like. We'll make sure you have the update on that. I appreciated the feedback on the email communication with regards to the third round of the New York State DEC EFC Septic System Replacement Fund in the amount of $595,000. With the acceptance and implementation, we have not had enough funds yet. We will tip the $1 million scale on replacement of these systems. Certainly well utilized in St. Lawrence County. Did want to give you the update as far as also just bouncing back to COVID for a moment. We did have 3 of our staff and 3 of our inmates with COVID reported in the last week's time. 3 officers and 3 who's that? My apologies. 3 incarcerated persons who and staff who have had a diagnosis positive for COVID in the jail. They're working through their normal protocol. We'll keep you updated on that. I am happy to report that the bench has been in place for Mary Lou Rupp that we will be dedicating. I'd like to either at the finance meeting or at the September board meeting hold a brief so that she's not mad at me, dedication ceremony in her memory, but that it will be over by the new location of the DMV tasks that are given. They moved off of Judson over onto Court. So we have a nice, I saw someone using it the other day. So she wouldn't be pleased just because she didn't like attention, but I'm honored, and we have the plaque in place. County Clerk Santamore secured the plaque, and we'll be attached to that. We'll organize that and get you a communication out to dedicate that bench. Budget reviews are starting their 3rd week. Budgets are coming in higher as you would expect. And I did just want to remind you that we have a new staff member. If you recall, the first 6 months, we contracted with our former employee at Social Services. We just wanted to mention to you that we're working with the department with new staff in place, and that is one of our most complex and complicated budgets. Just a reminder, no meeting next week. We're all off the hook to enjoy some summer. Finally, August 29th is finance. I will bring you the annual review of vacancies as well as some recommendations for the year going forward. Even later than July is our September board meeting on the 12th. So we will have that break for Labor Day, and we will come back to the September board meeting that condenses our schedule. It will be combined for operations and services. That is also the weekend or the Monday of NISAC, just so it's aware. And we'll have the finance committee meeting up to October. Questions?
Ruth, you attended the senior picnic?
Yeah.
Of the 225 senior citizens attending, said 225,
225, yes, sir.
how many were masked?
I didn't take a count, but I would say less than half.
Less than half? Like 10%? Thank you.
That's less than half.
What else? Move on to committee report, Board of Health. Frank.
I have nothing to report.
CDP Board of Directors, Mr. Sheridan.
Mr. Chairman, the CDP Advisory Board met on August 10th. At that meeting, Mr. Kelly, the IDA, had talked about the American Rescue Plan Act. The County Board of Legislators did in the August meeting on the funds that would be administered to St. Lawrence County's Industrial Development Agency. Board of Legislators declared the economic development tourism central to improving the services and activities available in St. Lawrence counties. We allocated $2,900,000 to ARPA funds distributed to the IDAs. We wanted to make it clear to the public and the organizations that would be interested in applying to these organizations where they can go to find out all the information they need to know about how to apply for these applications. And so for the press's sake, I'll repeat it. It's SLC, go to the site, slcida.com/AA or ARPA. That's .com/ARPA. And then you will find an application, for example, for the people who want new hire training. New hire training, and there's an application for existing worker training. There's an application for facility infrastructure improvements. There's an application for small businesses, nonprofit citizens. There's an application for travel, tourism, hospitality promotion. There's an application for travel, tourism, hospitality, capacity building grants, and CDLA, child care, heavy equipment operator, healthcare grant programs. They can click on for these applications. I'll be able to all the information they need. So that's what the highlight was of the meeting. So people did all of these applications.
Office of the Aging for Mr. Denisha.
Chair, we have not had a meeting, but we will talk about the senior picnic. Last Thursday, I would like to thank all the volunteers. We had a number of department heads, staff, a number of legislators. The Office of the Aging nutrition staff, they provided a great meal. We had some help from Governor Dave Spillman and his sons. We were missed, I didn't mention them. They helped with the parking, they had golf carts, they were bus bearing people back and forth. We said there were 225 seniors there. Senior citizens clubs from all over St. Lawrence County. And we also had residents from St. Joe's and from the houses. We brought them on buses. It was great. And we had local businesses that donated. So there was just a community. community-wide event that helped a lot of people, made a lot of
Thank you. The Youth Advisory Board, Mr. Knopf.
Thank you. Oh, I'm making loud. So we last met on Thursday, July 28th. It was the shortest record in Youth Advisory Board history, I think, coming in about 17.5 minutes. And she just briefly gave us an update of some allocations that went through. We received some additional funding for sport organizations. And they had, I think there were 5 or 6 applicants. They were very, very stringent on it being organizations dedicated to youth sports. So they ended up with Girls on the Run and Potsdam and the Little River Community School that were awarded allocations for the youth sports and opportunity funding. And then that really, we had two kiddos that submitted videos for the teen sextortion and suicide awareness campaign, and they both received the $50 gift certificates that we approved through the Riley Basford Foundation, a previous board meeting. We've got our next meeting is Thursday, the 25th of August. There is a Connecting Youth Services, so anybody that's involved in anything to do with youth. That meeting is Tuesday, September 13th at 2 o'clock. And the youth committee members will be meeting in person for the first time since the development of the youth committee. I believe it's this Thursday. So they're doing some community building events. This group of kids have never met each other in person. So for sure, a great opportunity for them to get together because they do some pretty incredible work in the county as volunteers. That's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Burke?
Margaret wanted me to mention that there's no meeting in July and August for the community services board. That was her report.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, she was absent. Is there any old business? And before we look at this table resolution, is there any old business? Is there any new business? No new business. We have a resolution that was tabled at the August full board meeting, supporting the efforts of community services and the wait list. Is anyone just removed from the table?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to remove this from the table.
Seconded by, moved by Mr. Avery, seconded by Mr. Denish. All in favor of removing it from the table?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's off the table. Mr. Reagan, you want to address it?
Sure. Mr. Chair, this resolution was produced a while ago in order to encourage our agency to take a hard look at how it handles the calls that come in from people who need help. Whether it's addicts who realize that they need help now, or people who have serious mental health issues and are looking for assistance. I thought that we needed to address their needs with a greater sense of urgency, rather than just say, well, you know, we have this growing list of people on our wait list. Instead, to encourage our agency to look at ways of getting them help as quickly as possible. And, you know, I'm pleased we heard tonight that our community services agency is addressing this and is working to get people help as quickly as possible, and it's succeeding. You know, the notion of, someone who's suffering from addiction, telling them, we'll see you in a while. I don't think works. Telling someone who needs serious mental health that there's we can't see you. I think it's incredibly important that we sure we triage them, sure we try to identify which ones need help the most and try to get help to them. But I think it's very important that we look around the county, and in those circumstances when another agency has people available and ready and willing to help that person, that we steer that person to where they can get the help they need. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think that the fact that we are beginning to do that is a good thing. And I would thank Jay, and I would thank his staff for making the effort. And I think that we and this resolution has already achieved my goal, which is to try to get people the help they need when they need it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'd like to make an amendment to this resolution. I support the resolution, but in our earlier conversations, I think what the stumbling block has been is in the last be it further resolved, that access to a same day appointment will be provided. I think we all know realistically that that's not good. I think that's been a stumbling block for some people. So what I would like to do is change that from access to a same day appointment to a first available appointment. I had further language, but I don't really want to put it in because I did not send it in the paper. But what I would have thought would be the first available appointment if possible. Further direct the community services director who serves as St. Lawrence County LUB to implement a community services bulletin board that the public accessible to the public, that all the available services available in St. Lawrence County post what their availability is. There's a lot of availabilities in there. I don't have it in writing other than what I just scratched out. But I really think that that's what it's needed so that we aren't burdening the receptionists or the secretaries in the community services with actually making calls to all the 10 or 15 or 20 different agencies that we have. That I think that in working with Mr. Johnson of IT, that some type of community bulletin board could be available on our county site, so that I could access and say, I'm having a bad day, or I know somebody that needs help that is suffering from addiction, their family is struggling. And that they themselves can go on and say, okay, there's 9 different entities or 7 different entities that are providing substance abuse services. Who is the first one available? And that those services would be, they would serve as an option for them, and actually availability. It would be Jay Owens' responsibility to make sure that these individuals, these businesses, these crisis centers are actually posting that so that it could be self-directed by the individual. It could be anonymous, they could choose. He mentioned earlier in his report that some of the clients actually want to stay with the county and try to think of a street that opted to do something different. So I think that what I would just like to change, I mean, that's the emphasis of what I want to do, but because I don't have it in writing, I don't want to Burton Kelly with,
How about if we read back what you gave us?
okay, I'll read it. So my amendment is, here, no, actually. So my amendment is in the be it further resolved that the change, that access to a same day appointment be changed to the first available appointment possible, and further direct the community services director who serves as the St. Lawrence County LGU, I'm sorry, LGU, yep, I misread my own writing. To implement a community services bulletin board available to the public, that all the available services, either mental or substance abuse, be posted with the timeline for availability of appointments.
What is the availability of employment?
Okay.
Does that work?
It does mean.
Let's go read back.
That would be my motion.
Shall I read it back? You're seconding, thank you.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Mr. Akers moved to amend this resolution to change the last date for the result to change same day appointment to a first available appointment possible. The first available appointment possible, and further direct community services director who serves up as the St. Lawrence County LGU to implement community services bulletin board, all services available to the residents of the county be posted with availability of appointments.
This was moved by Mr. Akers.
It's friendly, so you don't need a motion.
Okay, we don't need it.
Just
All right.
check the change.
All in favor of the amendment? Don't need to vote either. We're good. Is there any?
Well, I just got my hand. Yeah. I'd like to thank Jim. We've been talking about it a long time. I'm glad this finally comes to fruition. We are the lead agency. This is networking 101. Let's do what's right for everybody. And maybe the others will reciprocate, you know, it's a good first step. And we got to remember we're in a service providing environment by the best service in the country.
Mr. Burke?
I like the idea of the community services bulletin board. The only wording that I have problem with is that first available. You have to remember people do triage. So if you tell them that they have to give the first available appointment, that kind of waits out triage to people that need it. And again, I think the responsibility posting on the community site on this bulletin board should be the agencies. Most of these agencies receive downstream funding from the county. So the request or the directive to keep current information should be their burden, and they should post it. And I don't know, I like the idea, but I struggle with not having triage in there. Somebody calls and says, you know, I've been unable to sleep, my appetite's off. And the next person calls and says, you know, I don't want to live. Reason to, you know, that first person shouldn't get the first available appointment. There needs to be some level of triage built into that system.
But I think that Mr. Aldridge could frame that, John. I agree with you. So that if there's an emergency, that could be the opening to the bulletin board. If you were, you know, this is the number to call. And then that part of it. And then the rest of it is those agencies, this is what they provide. Some of those agencies are multiple. They do mental, they do substance abuse. And let them and see who's available. I think the sooner the better. just that people get better.
Sure.
Thank you, and thank you, Kevin, for the recommendation on the resolution, because it is, you're right, we do provide community services, and this is a fantastic way to make sure that people do have access to care, as well as Jay being in the know of who's available and who's not available as far as assessing the needs of the county as a whole. Even with the language change, though, there are still routes, right? There's in the resolution itself, it still says we're requiring same-day services to be available. And in that last, or now there, or be it resolved, we're still saying requiring same-day services throughout the resolution. So changing one point doesn't necessarily revise some of the other parts that have that notion of requiring a same-day appointment. What I'm afraid of is sometimes when you put metrics in place like this, that getting them off of our wait list, so we see a magic number 0, just put them on somebody else's wait list. And is that really going to benefit people? And that is my fear, is that we're giving them a metric that they're in order to get to, it's just shuffling people from one wait list to another, because we're not going to be observing the numbers on everybody else's wait list. So that's just the only reason that I am just very hesitant to go about this, but the intention of it, absolutely, I think it's a no-brainer. So I'm not sure where to go with that.
Sure.
I think you could even change that to same-day triage. Everybody should have same-day triage. I don't know what happens. It does. And if somebody just wants to be seen because they broke up with their boyfriend and they want to go talk to somebody about it, that's great. They'll get the first available appointment. But obviously, if somebody calls and says, I don't want to live anymore, you're not going to work them into your schedule at the office or at here anyway. They're going to have somebody go pick them up and take them to nurse emergency, probably in Idansburg. I wouldn't even think that they would walk that into like the new care over here, satellite age. So maybe we could tweak it a little bit if we were amenable to the concept of same-day triage. I would offer that as a friendly amendment to that little piece. But I mean, the thing is that we need what Jim says. We need to know what's going on in the county. We need to have that listed someplace. We need to make sure that agencies are keeping track of how long it does take somebody to get in countywide, because the LGU's job is to make sure that if we don't have enough services, we somehow make them through the county so that people kind of okay to have somebody end up having a suicidal act because we don't have any place to put them and we just don't know about it. At very least, very valiant effort to know what we have in the county, what the availability of appointments are, where they are, where we can get people in next to make sure people have coverage. And
Anybody else? Mr. Smithers.
I think this is very well intentioned. And I think the amendment sounds reasonable. However, the truth by the problems, someone's really in there. In the end, we tell Jay how to do the job. I look at Jay's response to the practicality. When we talked about it before, he presented a lot of information that made it sound like this is very well intentioned. It's idealistic, but it's very hard to implement, very unrealistic. While who knows what we desire, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to do it. So I'd like to get Jay's response to this.
Jay, would you like to weigh into this?
Sure. I mean, again, I think OMH, has what they call a bed finder, which is kind of a real-time site, but it's not public facing. It's for providers. So I have a little concern if this is going to be public facing and somebody sees that on our website, so immediately calls one of these agencies, and that slot that was originally available, say first thing in the morning, has been filled, then I'm not sure what's left for the individual seeking services to do at that point. But I mean, I think, it certainly is something that, is going to be beneficial. I guess whether it's public facing or whether it's internal to the providers within the county, I'm just not quite sure what the best route would be.
Anyone else? Mr. Baker?
So right now, we've got a waiting list. We've got 24 people on the waiting list. The effort of and the movement of this resolution is to minimize this. So I gave my example about substance abuse, about a heroin person, kids going hungry. I think it's real. And I think that what's happening now is you're put on a list. So in this particular situation, if this becomes possible, this bulletin, it's almost becomes self-directed, actually anonymous. And then if you don't get immediate, because the chances are with the burden that we have here, the demand, you're not going to get that day appointment. So there could be, just like you do it when you call and you get you're calling to order something and you go through the whole menu, and then in the end it's okay, it's 0. You get the operator. It could be just as simple as that. I spoke to Rick Johnson about this. This is something not in depth, just after a meeting, I think when the resolution first came up. Something that he'd be very much willing to work on. Nicole, your thing, the timelines, in the whereas, the word immediately could be struck. It's in there again, require same day services. If you had a suggestion how you would change that to eliminate the immediacy of it, I would be open to it. It's just the program is, we've got this problem and it's a waiting list and we want to do something about it. And this puts action in place to move in that direction. Right now, they're maybe calling the county, they're putting on a waiting list. Maybe they're not calling somebody else. Maybe they don't know about these other agencies. I certainly don't. And there's a pile of them. I had no idea. We got 9 mental health, we got 7 substance abuse, 2 of them are triage. I didn't know that. They're out there, but I was on the community services board. So I think it's, other than citizens advocates advertising and smoking cessation and things of that nature, if you're not listening to radio, if you're not on that channel, you're gonna miss out. Everybody's got a phone practically, and we could do a little bit of advertising and say, hey, this is the site available. So it can be self-directed, and still we would have somebody in the very end, like just like John had mentioned, let's have the triage thing on top, or that's a possibility. And then here, if you're at a spot here, dial 0, which could be community services.
Okay, so give me a chance, okay? You guys have the floor on that.
Yep.
John, I think that the person on the phone that is answering that call from this person that needs help, the first word she or he is going to think of is not triage. They're going to think, here's a real problem, this person needs help, if they come across like that. So I think that while it's a good idea, you got to remember that this resolution is going to go to everybody in St. Lawrence County that is interested in it. And then it's going to go on the shelf, and probably very few people are ever going to look at it. So I think that singular word really would be for internal consumption, because Mary Smith or John Doe that are answering that phone aren't probably ever going to see it. So my feeling would be, it's up to you guys, of course, that the resolution that Akers gave, it fits the bill. Mr. Akers moved to amend this resolution to change the last DIFR by changing the wording same day appointment to the first available appointment possible, and further direct Community Services Director who serves as the St. Lawrence County LGU to implement a community services bulletin board of all services available to the residents of the county, be posted with availability of appointments. What's the matter with that? What can we do to make that better? You accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yeah, they did.
Well, it's one that Kevin just. Okay, so unless there's some further discord, you tell me what you want to do. Go ahead.
All the questions.
One question? Questions follow. All in favor of the resolution as amended?
It's called a question. We're voting on it.
Favor calling.
I'm sorry, there's a second.
No, you don't need a second. I don't believe
Yeah,
this.
you did a second.
Do you for a second? I'll second that.
Yeah.
Mr. Cortez seconded. Any further discussion?
No dis-
No discussion. Guys, it's. All in favor of the. Friendly, huh?
I'm calling the question. We're voting on it.
Question.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay, the question is called. All in favor, of the friendly amendment, what do we need to do?
We need to vote on the resolution.
I think for the amendment, now you're supposed to vote on the resolution.
For the resolution, as amended, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We will carry. What do you need? You voted no vote? Yes. Okay, thank you. Any further business?